Before the emperor, they must clasp their hands together and bow their head in humility. They must not speak unless His Majesty addresses them first, nor may they question his commands, and wherever the emperor walks, they must remain exactly 3 steps away. Klaiden A, Locarso, the beautiful and mighty young emperor, has a face sculpted as if the god of creation and the goddess of beauty waged war to define it. He is a mortal whose existence casually threatens the very definition of beauty, and it does not stop there, for his swordsmanship is also legendary. A maid is standing behind him and asking him to allow her to take his cloak. "Your Majesty." This woman is his capable maid. She anticipates exactly what the emperor desires at any given moment, or, rather, he simply begins to desire whatever she prepares. It is enough to make him wonder. The emperor is sitting on his chair, and he thinks that first she will retrieve the documents, and the maid brings a pile of documents in front of him. While reviewing one document in his hand, he is looking aggressive and he wonders, looking at the maid, how can she maintain such a placid expression? And then he wonders, is she using telepathy? How did she know he wanted the paperwork? He literally ordered it yesterday. Another girl and a man are sitting around lots of documents and they are crying. The girl says that Your Majesty's handsomeness destroyed her equilibrium. She tumbled down 5 flights of stairs and shattered her femur, yet she is blissful, and she says further that His Majesty's aura caused her jaw to lock up, so she cannot speak anything other than His Majesty, and has taken a vow of silence for 5 weeks. The scene moves to the emperor's office, and looking at the maid he wonders, this is the normal reaction. Therefore, his maid is guilty of 3 cardinal sins. First, the sin of occupying the thoughts of a busy emperor. Secondly, the sin of occasionally offending his sensibilities, and finally, the sin of not falling in love with him. She is holding a lot of documents, and looking at the documents he says that he will review the documents now, and he thinks to himself, that woman is harder to conquer than a subjugation quest, and so today as well. 1 month ago, the day of the coronation, the butler congratulates His Imperial Majesty and tells him he wishes to present the attendants who will serve him henceforth. They are all scions of noble houses possessing the culture and refinement befitting His Majesty's dignity, and the emperor replies, "Very well." A girl standing with the butler speaks, "Your Majesty, it is an honor to serve him, sir." "It's an honor." "Congratulations, Your Majesty. You are so pretty." The emperor comes near that girl, and the butler wonders, looking at them, that it seems the moment they arrived they have been practically devouring the emperor with their eyes. This goes beyond rudeness. It borders on heresy. However, considering the type of person His Majesty is, the emperor simply says, "Thanks." Well, it is a small mercy in a tragic situation, since His Majesty has always been like that, where he will likely let it slide. A youthful superior appearance and swordsmanship that puts a sword master to shame. It would be strange not to fall for him. The emperor notices the servants behind the butler and asks, "Those the servants over there?" The butler speaks and says, "Your Majesty will have no occasion to interact with them. They omitted the introductions." The emperor is looking at the lady with golden hair. The butler introduces her. This is Lady Amelia, daughter of Margrave Valletta, and asks, "Did he perhaps meet while he was in the north?" And the emperor replies, "No, never." But the butler is noticing something strange, and he thinks, my instincts, honed by a lifetime as head chamberlain, scream the truth. His Majesty definitely had some interest in Lady Amelia. He calls Lady Amelia and tells her to start tomorrow, and she will swap duties with Lady Lucia, and she has to attend to His Majesty's office. Lady Lucia shockingly sits on the floor and starts crying, and the emperor asks her, "What is the meaning of this commotion?" And she asks, "What is she to do? Why is this trial befalling her?" The emperor asks her to stand up this instant, and she speaks, "This cannot happen. That seat was mine." The emperor asks her to watch her tongue, and she asks, does he know how hard she worked just to be by His Majesty's side? How much she suffered? The emperor asks, does she realize where she is standing right now? She tells him that to become the main maid she got over 50 disgusting bugs with her bare hands, she watered dying flowers, and yesterday she even picked up filthy trash rolling down the hallway. Does that not qualify her? The emperor appreciates her. "You did an excellent job at that, but they cannot overturn a decision already made. She says, "No, but why is she being rejected?" And the emperor asks, how dare she spout such insolence in the emperor's presence? And then he notices Lady Amelia and wonders, is she looking at him like that? The next day in the Oval Office, the butler is standing with Lady Amelia and telling her, from this moment on, Lady Amelia has no personal schedules. They never know when His Majesty will enter the office, so she must be on standby whenever he is awake. She replies, understood. The butler tells her that if a problem arises, report to him immediately. Everything she sees and hears in this room is strictly confidential, and it must never leave her lips until the day she dies. Actually, she may not record it in writing or illustration either. Her life and the safety of the House of Valletta depends on this, and she replies, yes, Chamberlain. Emilia thinks that during his days as Crown Prince, Emperor Klaiden was exiled from the capital for the crime of slaying a divine beast, the symbol of safety. The location was the far reaches of the northern border, just outside the Valletta territory, the territory of the family to which Emilia Valletta belongs. It was an event that heralded the downfall of the perfect Crown Prince. Considering the rage of the populace back then over the Crown Prince's crime, it is a miracle in itself that he sits on the throne today. But for her, a Valletta, that miracle is practically a curse. When a new emperor ascends, noble families offer lavish gifts that stagger their finances. These gifts are a display of loyalty and a benchmark for noble ranking, and for the House of Valletta, which inadvertently became the Crown Prince's jailers due to the proximity of his exile, they needed an even more precious gift to soothe the emperor's heart. However, in the Valletta territory where demonic beasts swarm the moment you let your guard down, did they have such financial leeway? And so, Valletta offered their daughter. Yesterday, he signaled for her to become his main maid, and she thinks further. She can roughly intuit her destiny. In short, the emperor gave her a strict warning upon their first meeting in a manner far too obvious. He signaled what he intends to do to her, a Valletta from now on. Meanwhile, the emperor enters the room and looks at her while standing in front of her, looking into her eyes. There is no mistake. This is revenge against Valletta. Klaiden A, Locarso, 24 years old, emperor of the Locarso Empire. As crown prince, the divine beast slaughter incident led to his exile in the north near Valletta. However, he returned to the capital and claimed the throne. With features perfect as a sculpture and brilliant golden hair, praise and awe have always followed in his wake. He lived a life accustomed to such worship, but amidst the chorus of adoration, there is one outlier. Emilia Valletta remained as unmoved as a stone, the only person who did not fall for him. Lady Amelia and the emperor stand facing one another, their gazes locked. The air between them feels tense and heavy. Nearby, the butler watches the scene unfold, his posture proper, but his thoughts restless. He wonders to himself whether this truly is His Majesty. The emperor only arrived at the palace yesterday, yet he is already present in the office. The butler questions whether the emperor intends to begin work immediately, as the man was never known for diligence in the past. Unable to keep his curiosity contained, the butler speaks, informing His Majesty that it was understood he would be resting today. The emperor responds calmly that the empire does not rest simply because he does. At those words, the butler is moved to tears and can only reply with a trembling address of respect. In his thoughts, the butler recalls Emperor Klaiden's days as crown prince, when he lived as though the very concept of diligence had been surgically removed from his mind. To change so drastically the moment the coronation ended can only be the result of 5 long years of exile. Truly, exile changes a man. The emperor now sits in his chair as the butler informs him that he was in the middle of instructing Lady Amelia on the layout of the office. He adds that he will continue her training during spare moments after His Majesty retires for the evening, and for now requests that the emperor give his commands to him instead. The emperor immediately refuses, instructing the butler to leave it to him. When the butler asks for clarification, the emperor states that he will personally instruct Lady Amelia regarding the layout of his office. The butler is stunned. Inwardly, he wonders if this change is not for the better after all. suspecting that the emperor may simply be using office orientation as an excuse to personally bully the daughter of Margrave Valletta. As the emperor studies Lady Emilia's eyes with clear curiosity, the butler notices the look and feels his spirit drain. He thinks to himself that he wants nothing more than to go home. That night, on the day of the abdication, the emperor rests on his bed. His thoughts wander as he reflects that he has returned to the imperial palace after 5 years of exile triggered by the crown prince incident. During that time, tragedy struck the imperial family, and the north was besieged by endless waves of demonic beasts. He remembers how he blocked those waves and proved his ability to defend the empire and protect its citizens. Because of that, he was able to return and claim the throne. Yet now, a storm of duties awaits him. He tells himself he must sleep quickly for the sake of tomorrow. Still, his thoughts return to Lady Amelia. He wonders why she made that face earlier. He knows that expression well, for it is the same one from 5 years ago, the look etched into the eyes of those who gazed upon the man who dared to kill a divine beast, contempt. But the world today is different. Because he stopped the calamity of the monster wave, people now praise him, claiming Klaiden A. Locarso is favored by the gods. They behave as though they have wiped their memories clean. During the coronation, all he saw in their eyes was longing and adoration. Everything seemed to have found its rightful place. And yet, Emilia Valletta is different. He cannot understand how she looks at him with such an expression. It is not terror, so it is not fear. He cannot quite pinpoint what it is, only that it feels incredibly unsettling. He wonders if he should describe it as unpleasant. One thing is certain, he senses that she is not normal. Suddenly, he shouts aloud, asking himself whether she dares to feel contempt toward him. Klaiden A. Locarso is a masterpiece inadvertently created by God. His appearance resembles a heavenly statue descended to earth, eyes holding the wisdom of the world, and he even possesses the qualifications of a sword master. He possesses beauty, intelligence, elegance, aura, and every masculine virtue combined into a complete being. The next morning, Emilia announces His Majesty's presence and asks if she may pose one question. The butler is shocked, thinking that she spoke first. He reminds himself that one must not speak unless the emperor addresses them. He wonders whether Lady Amelia is attempting to display that northern attitude and considers that perhaps it would be best for him to leave the room. The emperor, however, focuses entirely on her, wondering what question Emilia Valletta intends to ask. Lady Amelia, meanwhile, feels the emperor's gaze is prickly. She understands his reaction, for as a Valletta of the north, she knows the people of the capital tend to despise northerners, viewing them as savages from the land of beasts. Furthermore, since His Majesty suffered hardship in the north, perhaps seeing her brings back wretched memories. Regardless, her goal is clear. She must safely finish 3 years of service and return to Valletta. To do that, she must learn the office layout properly, starting today. She reasons that it would be better to explain this to His Majesty and receive proper training rather than flounder as a maid who does not know where supplies are kept. If she performs well, perhaps the ill will His Majesty harbors toward the north may lessen, even slightly. Today is crucial. With resolve, she asks for permission to pose her question. The emperor grants it, telling her to speak. She apologizes for her impertinence and points out that His Majesty only returned to the palace yesterday, suggesting that leaving travel matters to the head chamberlain might be more appropriate. The emperor is surprised by her confidence. Once again, he senses that expression he cannot decipher. He wonders if she is thinking that a ruler absent for 5 years could not possibly know the office. He responds by asking whether she is questioning the new emperor's capability to know and teach the layout of his own office instead of the chamberlain. Without pause, he begins listing details. He explains that behind her are spears, stationery, and paperweights. Inside the drawer are lighter items placed on top, with ink bottles and fountain pens below. Items for official decrees are on the far left, arranged by color density. Lady Amelia confirms that this is correct. Her response causes the emperor to pause. She verified his explanation instead of offering praise. He wonders how she knew this was the expected response and feels strangely annoyed, though he cannot explain why. She then asks about the bottom compartment. The Emperor explains that the bottom left compartment is empty space, next to which are important documents concerning influential territories. He warns her to be careful with the bottom drawer, as it contains original contracts, and adds that the drawer above contains an empty box for miscellaneous needs. Lady Amelia confirms his explanation internally. It is precise, exactly as he described. His Majesty clearly returned after 5 long years, and this is his first time in the office today, yet he knows everything. She comments that the space is empty just as he said and remarks that the head chamberlain must be systematic, having maintained the layout from the former emperor's time. She apologizes for her ignorance and compliments his knowledge. The emperor recognizes it as a compliment, yet it only irritates him further. He abruptly ends the lesson and tells her to stop for today and return to rest. She responds that she will report to the head chamberlain and withdraw. He interrupts, stating that if she does that, the chamberlain will come, so there is no need, she should simply leave. Lady Amelia insists that she is obligated to report everything that occurs in the office, including His Majesty working alone. If the chamberlain comes because of her report, she cannot stop him. She assures him that she will obey any separate command. Annoyed, the emperor snaps that if that is the case, she should search on her own. Lady Amelia responds that doing so might cause her to touch something she should not. She begs for proper education, stating that this is the solemn office of His Majesty, and things not to touch must be clearly taught. The emperor realizes that her logic is flawless. She leaves no opening for argument. Everything she says is correct, and he cannot refute it. She works well, is prudent, controls her emotions perfectly, and her conduct and etiquette are flawless. Emilia Valletta, as expected, is bothersome. The emperor reflects that, as the newly crowned ruler, he shall use his boundless generosity to tolerate her, no matter how bothersome she may be. With that decision made, he tells Amelia that everything in the room is fine to touch except the desk, instructing her to check the rest herself. She thanks him for the instruction and turns away. As she moves, he notices her voice. It is high, almost like a squeaky toy, yet her tone remains calm and composed. Her movements are cautious but swift, reminding him of a squirrel. He briefly wonders whether she might be a northern fairy, then corrects himself, no, a general fairy fits her better. The nickname forms naturally in his mind, coined without effort. She opens a drawer, and he observes that she moves without making a sound. He wonders if this is because she grew up traversing the northern forests where demonic beasts roam. The north is a barren land infested with monsters. When he recalls his exile during his crown prince days, he remembers how rough the northerners' lifestyle was, how their speech and conduct were generally subdued. Amelia fits that memory perfectly, without a single margin of error. She is the very image of a typical northern woman. And yet, she bothers him. He watches her closely. She is focused, working faithfully, as though she has forgotten she is in the same room as him. She studies miscellaneous items instead of admiring him. He recalls how, ever since his voice dropped, his presence at banquet halls would throw gatherings into chaos. People would shout about how the crown prince looked more manly each day. Women would hold their breath, trip over their feet, and fall like dominoes. Men were no different, staring with blank expressions filled with longing and jealousy. He remembers how he was often compared to the sun, so blinding that one cannot look at it directly, yet impossible not to turn toward it. And yet here stands a woman who does not seem to realize the sun has risen right before her eyes. He wonders if something is wrong with her, then dismisses the thought. There must be another reason. Perhaps a grudge. She is from Valletta. She might have witnessed the crimes he committed 5 years ago with her own eyes. If that were the case, it would be natural for her to shudder at the sight of him. But he has never met Emilia Valletta. He met Margrave Valletta and his sons, but not her. He questions whether they might have met somewhere else, perhaps at the old stream in the north during his exile, near the hut where he lived. Back then, for various reasons, Valletta women often gathered secretly to peek at him. Amelia might have been among them. But he quickly dismisses that possibility. There was certainly no Emilia Valletta among those women, because there is no woman in this world who could maintain such an indifferent expression after seeing his ecstatic and perfect nude form. Then perhaps she hates him solely based on rumors. He admits that he lived somewhat like a hooligan back then. Still, he blocked the monster wave and did everything he was supposed to do. He feels slightly wronged. Lost in thought, he does not notice her approach until she stands before him and addresses him. He thinks to himself, surprised, that she is already finished. He asks whether her assessment is complete. She replies that it is, thanks to the head chamberlain's systematic arrangement, which allowed her to grasp the layout easily. He notes with irritation that she even praises the chamberlain. Emilia Valletta, why is such a pretty woman so indifferent to him? He reassures himself that she could not have grasped everything with just one glance and assumes she will soon flounder. She continues, reporting that there are no missing items necessary for clerical work. However, she points out that there are no tools for maintaining His Majesty's sword and states that she will instruct them to be acquired immediately. He stares at her, wondering what on earth she is. The former emperor stopped wielding a sword years ago, so it is natural that no maintenance tools exist. Yet, she checked not only what was present, but also what was missing. The precision is terrifying. She then informs him that, since the fixture assessment is complete, she will now focus on His Majesty. The words catch him off guard. To say something so embarrassing so calmly unsettles him. He orders her to withdraw for now, stating that he will also return to his chambers. She obeys respectfully. The next day, in the Oval Office, Amelia stands alone. She exhales slowly and looks at her hands. She recalls that His Majesty's expression was not good yesterday for some reason. She wonders how she can avoid offending his mood and concludes that she has no choice but to work even harder. Someone enters the room. It is the butler. He addresses her, and she greets him as the head chamberlain. He informs her that, before His Majesty begins his duties, he will be standing with another man, Clevel Hines, the Imperial Chief Administrator. He explains that, for the next few days, Chief Administrator Clevel will educate her on the current status of the Empire. She looks at the administrator and the documents in his hands and thinks that the amount of paperwork today is quite large. She wonders whether they can finish safely. The Emperor then enters the office, and the butler announces his arrival. As His Majesty approaches the table, the butler tells Amelia that they will finish soon and instructs her to prepare the tea. She considers this her first assigned task and resolves to pour her soul into preparing the perfect cup. She prepares the tea and brings it into the office. The Emperor announces that they will begin and calls upon Chief Administrator Clevel. The administrator responds respectfully and states that, for His Majesty's glorious first day of work, he will explain the status of each territory in the Empire. He begins his explanation, emphasizing that significant changes occurred over the last 5 years, and that certain regions required detailed discussion. The Emperor urges him to proceed. The administrator acknowledges the command. The Emperor picks up documents and repeats his order to start. The butler and Amelia watch attentively as the administrator hesitates, then continues. The administrator requests blue ink. Amelia immediately steps forward, retrieves it, and hands it to him. He thanks her and continues discussing production data, referring to documents such as the Roberto Visconti file, 5-year trend data, and imperial history records. The Emperor asks about the grain production figures. The administrator indicates that the relevant document is located in the middle of the bookshelf. Amelia moves to retrieve it. The administrator specifies that it is the brown file folder. She brings it over, but the Emperor immediately corrects her, stating that it is the wrong one and calls her by name. She looks at him and responds, asking what is wrong. The Emperor looks directly at her and states that she is wrong, addressing her as Emilia Valletta. As he meets her eyes, she responds with confusion and asks for pardon. A moment ago, the Emperor reflects that the chief administrator is terribly bad at public speaking. The administrator hurriedly responds, acknowledging His Majesty, then stumbles through an explanation about previous output, questioning whether it should be expressed in terms of efficiency, economic feasibility, or performance relative to pricing. He rambles about needing to establish multi-year metrics to demonstrate overall growth in a simpler way, then requests the blue ink again. The emperor notes internally that he had planned to simply listen and wrap things up, yet that overly competent maid supports the administrator perfectly every time he is about to lose his flow. When the administrator refers to the Viscount Roberto territory and explains that the data reflects trends over the past 5 years, Amelia immediately retrieves the correct file from the bookshelf. As the administrator continues, mentioning the hardcover imperial history, the emperor realizes that the chief administrator does not even get a chance to fumble. He wonders bitterly whether the chief administrator is truly that interesting, or if Emilia Valletta is simply more focused on him than on the emperor himself. As he watches her, his thoughts drift back to her words from the previous day, when she stated that after identifying the utensils, she would focus on His Majesty from then on. He feels irritated and accuses her inwardly of lying, questioning how she dares say such things while clearly directing her attention elsewhere. Stepping closer, he tells the chief administrator to continue. The administrator obeys, but before he can proceed, the emperor interrupts and demands to hear the previous part again. The administrator attempts to summarize briefly, but the emperor insists on specific details, demanding the exact grain production figures. The administrator identifies the document as the brown folder, and Amelia moves immediately to retrieve it. Watching her, the emperor acknowledges her excellent focus and memory. Yet he thinks that if she had focused on him even half as much, she would not have failed to notice his charm. To him, not focusing on the emperor constitutes disloyalty and neglect of a maid's duty. He abruptly declares again that she is wrong. Amelia falls silent, then asks for clarification. The administrator, confused, asks what His Majesty means. The emperor states that he needs the grain tax data for the year and identifies the light brown folder. Amelia calmly informs him that the document he seeks is the one he is currently holding. The emperor challenges her, asking whether she is saying he is wrong. The administrator nervously confirms that it is indeed the correct document. The emperor orders the chief administrator to step back, declaring that he is speaking with his maid about the annual grain tax. The administrator is bewildered, wondering why His Majesty is addressing the maid instead of him. Amelia, however, responds respectfully, stating that His Majesty is correct and that she will find it immediately. She leaves to search for the folder, quietly wondering why he is angry when the document was correct. She assumes he may simply be mistaken after being away for so long. She returns with another folder and hands it to him. As she does, she thinks that she should organize the documents to make it easier for him to review them. The administrator examines the new document and confirms that this folder appears to be the correct one. He expresses relief and praises the office for being well equipped, suggesting they continue the briefing. As the administrator discusses tax rates and highlights notable data, the emperor is consumed by embarrassment. Of all things, he thinks he made such a foolish mistake. Even so, Amelia stepped back for him. Even when she knew he was wrong, she did not correct him openly. She did not snatch the correct document back, but instead placed it naturally into his hand so he could switch them himself. He realizes she showed him consideration simply because he is the emperor. Then he corrects himself, no, that is not it. The more unsettling realization is that she is the first woman to get under his skin this deeply. He studies her expression now, perfectly calm. He wonders whether she is unharmed or if she is simply indifferent. The administrator asks whether His Majesty is listening. The emperor admits that he is not. The administrator acknowledges this, and the emperor suddenly points to the map laid out on the table. He asks whether 2 specific regions look strange. He explains that one region is suffering from water shortages and therefore pays taxes in wool instead of grain. They have repeatedly requested support, claiming that conditions worsen almost every year. He questions why this continues to happen. At the same time, he wonders privately why Emilia Valletta gives him almost no attention at all. The administrator acknowledges the issue and silently questions why His Majesty is asking him questions that should be directed at the lords. When the emperor folds the map, he notices Amelia watching him with that same calm expression. He points to the map again and explains that the lake supplying that region is shared with another territory, which has been taking most of the water. As a result, one region survives on dairy without realizing the other has monopolized the source. The administrator agrees, stating that must be the cause. However, he notes that during years when grain yields in both estates were stable, taxes paid to the imperial family were also high. The emperor points at the map again and asks whether the issue should not be resolved. The administrator replies enthusiastically that resolving it would greatly increase profits and that mediation is necessary. He declares that assigning water sharing from now on will lead to the empire's prosperity. The emperor asks whether this prosperity would result merely from sharing lake water. The administrator answers that it is not the water itself, but His Majesty's wisdom. He adds emotionally that when the emperor was crown prince, he caused him much worry. Overcome, the administrator begins to sob. Amelia approaches him and offers a handkerchief, politely instructing him to use it. He thanks her. The emperor watches the exchange and feels intensely annoyed. The administrator remarks that today's session was quite fruitful and asks whether His Majesty agrees. As he holds the handkerchief, the emperor fixates on it and thinks with irritation that the administrator dared to blow his nose on his maid's handkerchief, something even he himself has not received. The emperor coldly states that he will see whether the administrator remains this competent tomorrow. The administrator is startled and wonders why His Majesty is suddenly glaring at the maid. He assumes the earlier mistake must have angered the emperor and resolves to be more careful. Clearing his throat, the administrator mentions that he will report the maid's earlier mistake to the head chamberlain. The emperor explodes, demanding to know what he is talking about. He insists that the administrator did not see how focused and capable she was at her job. He confesses that her competence is driving him mad precisely because it is so irritating. The administrator wonders whether His Majesty is acting strangely. He questions whether the emperor's emotional instability has increased alongside his wisdom. Deciding he must ensure tomorrow's training proceeds quickly and smoothly, he resolves to be more cautious. Lady Amelia steps forward and apologizes deeply, stating that she is sorry for offending His Majesty with her mistake. She promises to do her best to rectify her shortcomings and begs for forgiveness. The emperor repeats the word shortcomings to himself, then responds curtly that she has done enough and dismisses her. She expresses gratitude, saying that His Majesty's mercy is as vast as the sea. The emperor then dismisses the chief administrator as well. Both Lady Amelia and the administrator leave the room. Left alone, the emperor thinks to himself about her words. He wonders how much more perfect Emilia Valletta intends to become. The butler enters and asks whether His Majesty is hungry, offering to have snacks brought in. The emperor holds his head and replies that it is unnecessary. He remarks that Amelia should also be resting and declares that he will return to his chambers for the day. The butler notes that it was the first day and asks how His Majesty found Lady Amelia, offering to adjust her training if there were any shortcomings. The emperor reflects once more on the word shortcomings and answers that there were none. The butler is relieved and admits he was worried. Lady Rokarso was originally in charge of the office, and Lady Amelia is a northerner after all. He feared she might be too taciturn and stifling for life in the capital. The emperor counters that such traits are a great asset in the imperial palace. The butler agrees, stating that such an asset keeps one's head attached to one's shoulders. The emperor murmurs thoughtfully. When the butler asks what he means, the emperor replies that, as the butler said, she is full of assets, more than just one or two. Inwardly, he thinks that this is precisely why she is so annoying. The butler leaves the room and walks down the hallway, feeling unsettled. He thinks that the situation is truly terrifying and hopes His Majesty's words were sincere rather than sarcastic. He wonders whether Lady Amelia is crying. Old memories resurface from the days when His Majesty was crown prince. Back then, Ladies-in-waiting were initially joyful upon being assigned to him, only to end their first day in tears or screams thanks to his mischievous companions. Since then, many attendants found him dreadful. The butler thought the emperor had finally matured, but now he is unsure. Regardless, the look in His Majesty's eyes earlier, and the way he watched Lady Amelia during the abdication ceremony, makes one thing clear: His Majesty finds Lady Amelia bothersome. The butler knocks on a door. From inside, Lady Amelia asks who is there, addressing the chief attendant. The butler asks whether she has a moment. She agrees and invites him in. As he looks at her, the butler reflects that attendants are usually children of influential families with privileged access to the palace. Yet Lady Amelia is never arrogant and is always polite. Most are desperate to dig up information that would benefit their families. He wonders whether this is what His Majesty meant by assets. When perfection has no visible flaw, it can only become irritating. He enters and sits across from her at the table. He tells her that he heard she did well today, despite it being her first day. She responds that she does not believe that is the case. The butler thinks to himself that she is the only lady-in-waiting who did not scream on her first day with His Majesty, though he cannot say that aloud. Instead, he reassures her that he knows she worked hard. She thanks him respectfully. The butler considers the emperor again. People in the capital are expressive with praise, and His Majesty is used to long-winded admiration. A northern attitude like hers might easily lead to misunderstanding. Perhaps that is why His Majesty finds her bothersome. He advises her not to be too nervous, explaining that if she is tense, His Majesty will feel it as well. She asks whether His Majesty might be angry, admitting that he seemed a bit different today. The butler assures her that he is not angry and says he would have told her if that were the case. She accepts this. The butler then asks whether she is worried that His Majesty holds a grudge against Valletta or the Marquis. He admits that His Majesty is difficult to read, but clears his throat and adds that the emperor is more broad-minded than he appears, and wiser as well. He mentions hearing that His Majesty found a solution simply by looking at the reports. Lady Amelia agrees, saying that it was truly impressive. The butler adds that His Majesty will surely become a magnificent emperor and suggests that perhaps she should praise His Excellence a bit more, since making His Majesty happy is also a way to show loyalty. Lady Amelia responds calmly that if His Majesty governs well, his servants should not mislead him with empty flattery. She states that clouding judgment with emotions and personal ties is a dereliction of duty and the height of negligence for a lady-in-waiting. She asks whether he agrees. The butler concedes that she is correct. She continues, stating that as a lady-in-waiting of the office, she will prove her loyalty and that of House Valletta by helping His Majesty focus on state affairs. The butler thinks that to find someone as impossible to talk to as Emperor Klaiden is remarkable. He realizes that buttering someone up would never work on this stiff-necked northerner. Aloud, he praises her resolve and calls it admirable. He rises from his chair and tells her to get some rest, warning that tomorrow will be another long day. She thanks him sincerely and smiles, expressing gratitude for his visit. The butler is briefly taken aback, thinking that he did not realize she could smile like that. When she steps forward to speak again, he quickly dismisses it, saying it is nothing, and excuses himself before leaving the room. The next day, during training in the office, everyone stands in their assigned places. The emperor holds files in his hands. The butler observes that His Majesty seems quite satisfied with the administrator again today. Lady Amelia is completely absorbed in her work. She has organized all the filing cabinets with meticulous care. There is technically no need to work that hard, but still, her dedication stands out. From yesterday's conversation, the butler has learned that, unlike other ladies who served His Majesty, Lady Amelia does not seem overwhelmed by him. On the other hand, it is clear that His Majesty's mood has soured precisely because he has never encountered someone like her. In the butler's 30 years of service, this does not look like a grudge, it looks like sulking. He resolves to clear up the misunderstanding between them. Mistaking her typical northern bluntness for dislike, or assuming His Majesty hates her due to a grudge against Valletta, could only cause trouble. If he does nothing, He will be the one with the greatest headache. Lady Amelia's father is the Marquis who defends the North against magical beasts. He cannot allow such a man to worry about his daughter. The butler addresses the Emperor, remarking that His Majesty worked hard during training again today and appeared quite dependable. He adds that Lady Amelia also seemed much more accustomed to her duties, and that her progress in just one day is remarkable. The Emperor replies that he looks forward to what is to come. The butler is momentarily thrown off by the cold response, but recovers quickly. He agrees, stating that maintaining smooth relationships with those who serve His Majesty directly is essential for the proper handling of state affairs. He then adds that Lady Amelia was also praising His Majesty, saying she was quite impressed by his wisdom during yesterday's training. The Emperor is visibly surprised and responds that she said nothing of the sort to him. After hearing the Emperor's reaction, the butler thinks to himself that, at times like this, his intuition is rarely wrong. He responds by noting that Lady Amelia is a northerner and adds that his own wife is also from the north. He recalls how taciturn she is, remembering the day she calmly told him that she would be having a baby the next day, having not said a single word about it until then. He explains to the Emperor that, after speaking with her several times, it became clear she simply was not good at expressing her feelings in the way people from the capital are. He suggests that this is simply how northerners are. He continues, saying that Lady Amelia has not even been in the capital for long yet, and that she should be given time to adjust. The Emperor repeats the phrase, "not good at expressing her feelings," in his mind. He considers the possibility that, if this is true, perhaps Emilia Valletta does not hate him after all. After observing her for 3 days, he concludes that she is not someone easily swayed by others' words. Even if the Valletta household had poured slander about him into her ears, she would not be the type to accept it blindly. That realization leads him to wonder whether she truly dislikes him as much as he assumed. Lost in thought, he barely notices when the butler calls out to him and remarks that people often say tired meat tastes better once it has rested. He suggests that perhaps His Majesty could help Lady Amelia grow accustomed to his strengths. If she sees someone's good side often enough, she will naturally be moved by it. If that impression builds up, emotional expression will follow on its own. The butler adds that he can say this with confidence because Emperor Klaiden is outstanding. If one looks closely, his human charm is also considerable. It is simply that no one has stayed by his side long enough to recognize it. He concludes that the first step to clearing up the misunderstanding is for His Majesty to treat Lady Amelia a little more generously. The butler then explains that, for Lady Amelia, it is simply a matter of needing time to adjust. She came alone from the north to the imperial palace, and His Majesty must seem intimidating to her. The north and the capital differ greatly in location, climate, and even daily habits. No matter how strong one's family ties are, coming all this way alone could not have been easy. He adds that the sense of distance she feels is probably far greater than His Majesty anticipates, and that this distance is the first thing that must be reduced. The Emperor replies that this may be impossible due to his natural dignity, which inherently creates distance. The butler thinks to himself that, after seeing the Emperor for 5 years, it truly is difficult to adjust to him. The Emperor then clarifies that what he means is that Lady Amelia must be made less nervous in his presence. When young ladies become flustered before him, it is because they feel overwhelmed by his charm. Therefore, he reasons, he should show her his charm kindly and slowly, and then all problems will be solved. Listening to this, the butler wonders inwardly whether turning resentment into affection might truly be such a perfect method. The Emperor reflects that the reason Amelia's attitude troubles him is not simply because she has failed to notice his charm. Memories of those 5 years of exile in the barren north resurface. He wants to erase them. He no longer wants anyone to look at him with eyes filled with contempt. Stepping closer to the butler, he cheerfully praises him, saying, "Well done, head chamberlain." The butler, startled, asks for clarification. The Emperor replies that this advice will be a massive help. The butler, confused but polite, expresses his gratitude. Internally, he thinks apologetically toward Lady Amelia, sensing that something may have gone terribly wrong. On the final day of Chief Administrator Clevel's training, they stand together in the office. Lady Amelia greets His Majesty politely. The Emperor holds his head, then looks at her and suddenly begins laughing. His expression brightens unnaturally as he comments on how lovely the weather is. Lady Amelia agrees that the weather is indeed lovely, then hurriedly excuses herself to prepare the tea. The Emperor laughs again and remarks that he is truly looking forward to seeing what kind of tea she will prepare. When she returns with the tea and begins pouring it, Lady Amelia feels unsettled. She wonders what is happening because this is the first time in her life she has seen a smile like that. It is dazzling yet so intense that it feels deeply uncomfortable, not just slightly, very uncomfortable. She searches for a word to describe it. Beautiful and magnificent do not fit. It feels different from that. She realizes that it is flawless, almost inhuman. This, she thinks, must be how people from the capital smile. They are truly different from northerners. In the north, people live under constant insecurity, with nerves perpetually on edge due to unpredictable monster waves. No one there wears expressions like this. Because of that, such perfection feels foreign and unsettling. As she pours the tea, the Emperor watches her closely. She thinks again that it is too perfect. The Emperor reacts in surprise, then laughs and praises her, saying that he looks forward to someone as perfect as her. He asks her to hand him the cup. She does so, and he thanks her, saying he will enjoy it. He takes a sip and hums thoughtfully. Lady Amelia asks how it is. He replies that it is perfect and steps closer to her. She stiffens at the distance. He thinks that the tea is not exactly perfect, but good enough. Even so, he tells himself that he must not lose his kindness. He repeats his praise and waits, expecting a compliment in return, perhaps about his smile. But Lady Amelia remains silent. Looking at her, he wonders why she seems to be ignoring him. Meanwhile, she thinks that his smile is so perfect that she already feels disappointed by it. She cannot even bring herself to look away. The Emperor recalls the butler's words that she simply does not know because she is a northerner. He reasons that there is no way her sense of beauty could have developed among such dreary northern lands. At the same time, Lady Amelia feels lightheaded. She wonders what this strange sensation is and realizes that, no matter how uncomfortable she feels, she cannot exactly tell the Emperor to stop making that face. At that moment, the administrator enters and reports that he has brought the construction estimates requested for the day. He explains that shipping costs are heavily influenced by the season and advises keeping potential price fluctuations in mind. The Emperor acknowledges this calmly, and the administrator withdraws. The Emperor turns back to Lady Amelia and addresses her again. She responds at once. He laughs once more and asks whether they should begin her training, specifically, her training to get used to his beauty. Amelia looks visibly startled by the Emperor's strange behavior. Inside her mind, confusion stirs as she wonders whether he has eaten something wrong. She cannot understand why he is acting like this all of a sudden. That perfect smile troubles her deeply. She questions what is wrong with it and why it feels so unsettling. Even so, she responds obediently that she understands, addressing him as His Majesty. At the same time, she wonders helplessly where she is supposed to look. They stand facing each other in awkward silence until the administrator clears his throat to draw their attention. He announces that today's lesson will cover relatively light topics, and he begins his explanation. He reports that, during the 5 years His Majesty was away from the capital, he will now brief him on the major events that occurred within the empire. He clarifies that it is more of a general report than a formal lesson. As Amelia listens, she feels a small sense of relief, thinking that, since this is a status-based lesson, she will not need to hand him documents. However, a different kind of unease quickly replaces that relief. That perfect smile, that sweet voice, that gentle gaze, it is all too much. She wonders why His Majesty is acting this way only today. It feels excessive, so overwhelming that it is hard for her to keep her eyes open. Inwardly, she thinks she would rather he shout about hating the North, because at least then she could apologize. The administrator continues, explaining that, while one incident appeared to be a private family matter, it was closer to a factional struggle between two major powers. The emperor listens while quietly observing Amelia. He notices that she is still avoiding his gaze and thinks to himself that she is an unyielding woman. The administrator carries on but soon notices the emperor's lack of focus. He raises his voice slightly and explains that a love affair between two influential southern families escalated into a territorial war. While it was officially a territorial conflict, it also became a fascinating piece of gossip in high society. Hearing this, the emperor reflects bitterly that it truly is an interesting topic for high society. He thinks of Emilia Valletta and realizes he cannot focus on the story at all. He blames her for ruining his already fragile social life, even though he admits that the responsibility for everything ultimately lies with himself. He reflects that he has never truly needed to try to win someone's favor in his life. His natural charm and status were always given to him effortlessly. Yet now, for the first time, he is making a deliberate effort, and she is still unimpressed. She ignores him completely, despite her beautiful face. That fact frustrates him deeply. The administrator announces that he has finished all the prepared materials and asks whether His Majesty has any questions. The emperor thinks to himself that, if anyone knows how to make that bear-like, dull northern woman smile, he would like an answer. Aloud, however, he responds that he has no questions. The administrator acknowledges this and prepares to take his leave. As he turns to go, Amelia suddenly stops him, politely addressing him as chief administrator. He turns back in surprise. The emperor watches closely as Amelia praises the administrator, saying that he worked very hard and that the lesson was truly informative. The administrator laughs warmly, and Amelia laughs along with him. The emperor freezes in shock. He stares at Amelia, stunned by her reaction. In disbelief, he wonders whether she just smiled at the chief administrator and not at him, despite his perfect smile. He questions where her eyes are even located and begins to suspect that something must be wrong with her sensory organs. Lost in his thoughts, he barely notices Amelia approaching him. She asks carefully whether something is making His Majesty uncomfortable now that the chief administrator has left. As he looks at her, he recalls the head chamberlain's words that what she needs is time. Without answering, he turns away. Amelia calls after him, addressing him again as His Majesty. He picks up his sword and asks whether they should go. They begin walking through the hallway together. As they walk, the emperor reflects deeply. He wonders what Emilia Valletta would be like if she were a man. With such mental fortitude, they would have become rivals crossing swords. But such a scenario could never exist, he realizes, because then the genre itself would have changed. His thoughts turn serious as he considers the political reality. The military aristocracy, a coalition of nobles who grew powerful through privileges granted during the retired emperor's reign, once called for his execution during his exile. Even now, they remain opposed to him. They are currently split between the retired emperor's faction and the Empress Dowager's faction. To stabilize the throne, he must suppress their power and focus on defending the empire against magical beasts for the people's sake. To restore relations with the Margrave of Valletta, who defends the front lines, is essential. There is no better diplomat than Emilia Valletta. That means he must make her recognize his charm and win her over. It is also a matter of reclaiming his pride as a man. Having reached that conclusion, he decides he will waste no more time. He thinks that the only move left is a direct frontal assault. He recalls the butler's words that one who has tasted meat knows best how to eat it and thinks that perhaps helping her get used to his strengths is the answer. He resolves that today he will move her heart. He will pile up those moments until they stand as immovable as a mountain. Lost in his determination, he does not immediately hear Amelia calling out to him, pointing out the place they have arrived at. His thoughts catch up as he recognizes the surroundings, the Imperial Guard Knights' training grounds of the Locarso Empire. He watches her closely and senses her tension. He thinks that she is flustered, that the solid wall around her heart is finally beginning to shake. He asks whether she is afraid because there are so many knights present. Amelia quickly denies this, explaining that it is not fear. She says that this is a training ground, not an office, and that is what unsettles her. The Emperor reflects silently, wondering what exactly he is supposed to do with Emilia Valletta. He thinks that, since she is an office maid, perhaps she is troubled because a male servant in charge of the training grounds should be here. He turns back to her and calls her name. She responds immediately. He tells her to simply watch. He calls for the knight commander, who arrives at once and salutes. The Emperor orders him to begin a duel. As he steps forward, drawing his sword from its sheath, the Emperor looks toward Amelia and thinks that, once again, with his broad heart, he will win her over. He declares inwardly that he shall forgive her. Amelia stares at him in complete shock after hearing those words. Amelia stares at him in disbelief, her thoughts spiraling as she wonders what exactly she is supposed to be forgiven for. She cannot understand it at all. If only he would tell her directly what she did wrong, she is certain she could fix it. More knights gather around the training grounds. The knight commander announces to them that His Majesty Klaiden has graciously granted them a chance to spar with him. As their names are called, the knights step forward one by one, each expressing their gratitude to His Majesty. Watching the scene, Emilia reflects that, as a northerner accustomed to daily combat, the training grounds feel familiar to her. At the same time, she cannot help but notice how disciplined and luxurious everything is, exactly as one would expect of the Imperial Guard. She thinks that the budget here must be incomparable to what they have in the north. If only the magical beasts were the wrong Valletta's problem, the situation in her homeland would be much better. Her attention sharpens as the sparring begins. She watches the Emperor in action and feels genuine surprise rise within her. She thinks that her father's swordsmanship, which she saw every day, was truly impressive, but His Majesty's skills are astonishing beyond comparison. The realization that this is only his warm-up leaves her stunned. On the training grounds, the Emperor defeats one knight after another. After one falls, he calls for the next. A knight nervously asks him to go easy on them, but the Emperor only smiles. Amelia notices that smile and realizes that, although she has seen it all day, this is the first time she has seen him truly happy. There is no forced perfection now, no distractions. His strikes are sharp and refreshing, filled with clarity and intent. She realizes that His Majesty truly loves the sword. Another knight falls in total defeat. Amelia thinks that, once again, it is a complete victory for His Majesty. His swordsmanship is on an entirely different level, just as expected of the Emperor. After defeating another opponent, he removes his coat and throws it to the ground. Amelia stares at him, startled by the sight of his disheveled clothes. At the same time, the Emperor notices her gaze and thinks with satisfaction that she is finally watching him closely. He steps forward toward the next knight. The knight hurriedly protests that he has already been defeated, but the Emperor strikes again, pressing the attack with his sword. In his mind, the Emperor is convinced that she must be capturing this image of him perfectly with her eyes. He thinks that words like admiration and awe could never fully contain his incredible beauty. As the sparring continues, Amelia notices the discarded coat on the ground. She walks over and picks it up, holding it carefully in her arms. Around her, the knights stare in shock. Looking down at the coat, she suddenly realizes that there is dirt on His Majesty's clothes. The Emperor notices her movement and is taken aback. He wonders whether she truly did not see what everyone else sees. Nearby, one knight mutters that, as a member of the Imperial Guard, he witnessed His Majesty grace the training grounds in unusually high spirits, smiling the entire time. Yet, for some reason, his strikes were ferocious and his movements exaggerated, as if he were trying to show off to someone. That someone, however, seemed to be unintentionally ignoring all of it. The knight concludes that this must be treason. Another knight urges him to do something about it. The first knight responds helplessly, asking what exactly he is supposed to do, beat that woman? Amelia approaches the Emperor with the coat draped neatly over her arm. She stops in front of him and lifts her gaze toward his face. The surrounding knights whisper that she is finished, that she is in serious trouble, some even laughing nervously. The emperor suddenly realizes that the words he should have said earlier were not that he forgives her, but that she should watch him closely. A loud laugh bursts from him, echoing across the training grounds. The other knights begin laughing as well. He declares that today's sparring has been satisfactory and that it has been a long time since he enjoyed such a fun warm-up. The knight commander watches him with deep admiration. He thinks that His Majesty possesses perfect swordsmanship, beauty, and even a magnanimous spirit that does not dwell on small matters. To serve such an emperor is an honor. The emperor announces that they will return to the office. Amelia answers obediently, and they begin walking back together. As they walk, Amelia's thoughts grow troubled. She wonders whether it is really acceptable for His Majesty to return to the office in this state. She questions whether it would be proper etiquette to help him dress again, especially since she is not in charge of the training grounds. She wishes desperately that the head chamberlain were present. At the same time, the emperor notices that she is finally looking at him properly. Inwardly, he savors the moment and wonders how it feels for her to witness his perfect body. He is convinced that she cannot possibly put it into words and that, from now on, no other man will ever satisfy her. He tells himself that a ruler must sometimes be cruel. Emilia Valletta, he decides, will be the one to whom he chooses to be cruel. Amelia calls out to him, addressing him as His Majesty. He asks what it is. She tells him that she will escort him to his bedchamber. The emperor freezes in surprise. He repeats the word bedchamber in disbelief. In his thoughts, he marvels at her boldness, never expecting this from Emilia Valletta. She explains calmly that he cannot attend to his duties looking so embarrassing and that it would be best for him to change his clothes quickly. She adds that he would be even more embarrassed going alone, so she will escort him to his room. She urges him to hurry. The emperor stands stunned, his thoughts spiraling around the words bedchamber and embarrassed, unable to reconcile them with the intentions he imagined. The emperor remains silent, and Amelia keeps her composure, quiet as ever. Klaiden, however, is lost in thought. Yes, he recognizes this sensation, the chill of the winter before last, memories of exile in the north, the blizzard slamming against his sweat-drenched chest as he drifted mindlessly from the cave after sword practice. Breath-stealing cold, shock, embarrassment, 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 embarrassment. Afterward, he changes his clothes in his room, the day spent in thought, and finally rests at night on his bed. He muses, embarrassed? Me? The next morning, Amelia enters the office and greets him with a polite, "Good morning, Your Majesty." He returns the greeting. "Good morning to you, Amelia," noticing how peaceful he looks today. That's a relief, she thinks. Amelia quickly excuses herself to prepare tea. Sitting in his chair, he wonders that he did not sleep a wink. Watching her, he notices how precise she is. The tea she prepares will not be too cold nor too hot, the flavor just perfect. It is as if her touch and judgment are flawless in any situation. She places the tea carefully on the table in front of him and asks if he requires anything else. He shakes his head, replying, "Nothing, nothing else," and takes a sip. As expected, he thinks, flawless. If only yesterday's incident had not occurred, he might have enjoyed the training grounds more. His gestures of kindness, meant to reconcile with Amelia, had been utterly wasted. A trivial misstep could never harm his pride, yet any ordinary woman in this situation would writhe in conflicting emotions of rage and attraction. Emilia Valletta, however, blatantly ignores him. Her hostility, he concludes, must outweigh any other sentiment. Even now, she gazes out the window with that maddeningly calm expression. To maintain such indifference before him must mean something lies hidden within her heart. He vows silently to unearth it, to break it, and to make both her and Margrave Filard Valletta bow as loyal subjects. This is a battle of wills, Emilia Valletta. After a moment, she breaks the silence, asking politely if he has any commands to give. He replies that there is nothing, but then asks what caught her attention out the window. She answers that the weather is pleasant and that she was merely gazing at the sky. After a short pause, she continues thoughtfully. Compared to the north, the capital's sky is clearer and more pristine. The northern sky, she reflects, bears a deep, dark blue even on clear days, fitting for bitter cold, almost as if the sky itself had frozen. She admits it is natural to cherish the sky of one's homeland above all others. Yet, she cannot deny that the northern night sky is the most beautiful, for the stars shine brighter and clearer than anywhere else in the empire. Amelia adds, however, that her interest is not sentimental. Observing the sky is part of her duty, monitoring frost or snow for the crops and livestock. She must be able to perceive even subtle variations in the sky's hue. Klaiden contemplates her words. To remain oblivious to such delicate variations would be beneath the senses of a true observer. Her perception is sharper than most. Good training indeed. Let us go outside, Emilia, he says, rising. The imperial garden, it is beautiful and colorful. She follows, startled as he gestures to the vivid colors of the peacock's tail feathers. Peacocks? Tail feathers, she murmurs. He observes her carefully. Now, behold such beauty. How does it feel? Do her aesthetic sensibilities awaken? Looking at the peacocks, Amelia comments, the tail feathers, they have such a glossy sheen. It seems the keeper manages them excellently, Your Majesty. Klaiden is taken aback. The keeper? Managing? He thinks. Instead of simply admiring their beauty, she speaks of husbandry. As expected, her vision is as poor as a mole's, but, strictly speaking, it is her ability to process visual information that is limited. It matters not. I shall embrace even such trivial weaknesses with my boundless magnanimity. She will surely improve with training. Amelia laughs softly, thinking that His Majesty must have wanted to see the peacocks. She is relieved to see him in such high spirits. He takes her arm gently. Sit beside me, Amelia. You will strain your neck looking down. She bows politely. Forgive me. He waves her closer. Yes, just in time. Look, the peacocks are heading this way. Observe their graceful approach, clearly recognizing their master. Such beauty. As they near, the peacocks touch her face with their beaks. She laughs nervously, exclaiming that she has no food to give them. That tickles. Klaiden's thoughts darken mischievously. Freeloaders. Eating and sleeping in my home for free, ungrateful wretches. Amelia laughs at the peacocks and Klaiden's temper flares, though subtly. He seethes at their audacity, thinking them shameless, unworthy of even a commoner's hovel, for daring to touch her. The garden's caretaker rushes over, startled at the scene, and apologizes, promising to remove the birds immediately. Klaiden waves him off, more amused than angry, noting silently that Amelia seems genuinely enjoying herself. She hesitates for a moment, then tries to speak with him. He guesses at her intent, assuming she might be seeking someone to manage the palace gardens, and says that this is not the office, and it is not the bedroom or the training grounds either. Amelia quickly clarifies that serving him is an honor and that the responsibility falls upon her to handle what is required, since he has effectively assigned her this role. Klaiden studies her, his gaze piercing, silently questioning whether such a simple concept is too difficult to grasp. She bows her head in apology for her oversight, promising to inform the head chamberlain, and he permits it with mild grace. Amelia cannot help thinking that he must have found being served by other attendants uncomfortable, which explains why he singled her out. She wonders how she could have been so slow-witted. She must report this to the head chamberlain. He notices her getting lost in thought. For a brief moment, the calm of the garden, the soft breeze, the clear sky, the quiet hum of nature offers a peaceful silence, and the emperor wonders whether, since entering the imperial palace, this might be the first break he has ever taken. Tea and other refreshments are brought out, and she prepares to serve, only to be surprised when he gestures for her to eat. Realizing that even here, in the Valletta territory, he wants her to test everything carefully, Emilia begins sampling the cakes, thinking that he must desire a maid capable of handling every situation, even detecting poison. She marvels at the flavors, feeling a touch of guilt at enjoying them alone, imagining her younger brother in the north savoring such delicacies. She informs him that the cake is safe, prompting him to examine even the bright, shiny strawberry atop it. He encourages her to continue tasting the other desserts, observing that her reactions suggest a keen sense of taste. Peacocks venture closer, nibbling at the cake she holds, and he cannot resist teasing them lightly, though his attention remains on her. He reasons that, if her sight is dull, testing her other senses is wise. Combining sweets with a picnic seems a masterstroke to lower her guard, and his judgment appears correct. Amelia describes the flavors in detail, noting the cream softness and subtle cheese-like hint, and how perfectly it pairs with the fresh raspberries. His thoughts dwell on her calm, monotone voice and the meticulous care with which she conveys taste, concluding that she must find it delicious. He considers that bonds are often formed over shared meals, and while he approaches carefully, he intends to show her his generosity and patience. She finishes her explanations, asking if he requires anything further. He instructs her to continue eating while he enjoys the remaining desserts elsewhere, emphasizing his dislike for wasting food. She hesitates, noting that sharing food with a maid might violate palace protocol, but he challenges the notion, dismissing the head chamberlain's authority in this moment. She realizes he specifically wants her to enjoy the treats fully, so she continues, feeling both gratitude and mild confusion. Observing him, she notices he has not touched any of his own desserts. She wonders if this is some subtle form of revenge, recalling the time of his exile near Valletta. Back then, the public opinion of the crown prince was dire, attacks from the Valletta family were frequent, and his survival had depended on overwhelming martial skill. Perhaps, she muses, he is now restraining himself to avoid bloodshed, using this quiet, intricate method of tormenting her instead. Despite the worry, she convinces herself she can bear it if it will placate him and preserve her family. When he offers a glass of water and remarks on how quickly she is eating, asking if the flavors please her, Amelia confirms that the taste is exquisite, yet her thoughts linger on the subtle sting of his revenge. Each bite carries the sharpness of his intent, mingled with sweetness, a reminder of both his power and his attention. She recognizes that surviving in his favor will require endurance, understanding, and careful navigation. This is the Emperor's way, measured, yet unyielding. Klaiden rises, brushing off the last crumbs of dessert. He suggests going back inside, and Amelia complies without hesitation. She thinks that if His Majesty's little acts of revenge are this sweet, then she can endure them. When they return to the office, a large basket of candies sits in the center of the room. Amelia is taken aback, wondering what this could possibly be. Klaiden explains that he had originally asked for snacks for himself, but noticing her preference for sweets, he has decided they are hers to enjoy. She thanks him politely, offering to share them with the other maids. He immediately stops her, leaning in to make it clear that these are for her alone. Amelia flushes at the thought. She understands that she cannot share an imperial gift meant specifically for her. She replies, she can understand, and says thanks. And Emperor thinks himself that he knew that she would like it. Once Klaiden declares the day's work finished and retreats to his chambers, and asks Amelia to leave and take some rest too. Amelia carries the basket through the hallway, all eyes following her. Servants whisper in curiosity, puzzled at the sight of her treasure. Amelia keeps her composure, telling herself that if enduring these small torments pleases His Majesty, if she is the only target and not the Valletta family, she can bear it. Still, a small ache lingers in her chest, wishing he would express his anger more openly rather than these silent, teasing gestures. And servants are wondering that why did she get that precious basket? Did a maid save a royal or something? Later, in her own room, she is standing near the basket, and looking at the basket, she wonders that with this what should she do, and she did not even get a dinner today. It feels like the sweet scent is lingering at the tip of her nose. She does not think she will be able to even look at dessert for a while. And she contemplates that revenge. If His Majesty's revenge against Valletta is only this much, she can gladly endure it even every day. Still, a small ache lingers in her chest, wishing he would express his anger more openly rather than these silent, teasing gestures. And in the north His Majesty Klaiden was called an unbridled man even after daring to kill a divine beast, the height of arrogance, shamelessly running wild. For someone like him, this is practically cute. It's actually a relief for the Empire and for the north. By this time His Majesty's revenge is over, she will probably have gained quite a bit of weight. Will Reglan be surprised? Someone asks her, is she in? When she checks, this is Butler, and she asks what's the matter. Butler comes to check on her after hearing she skipped dinner. And Butler wonders himself, that is the very thing the Grand Emperor would send the day after a marital spat to the Grand Empress as a token of apology. Amelia explains that His Majesty asked for some snacks to be brought to his office, but it seems the kitchen misunderstood. His Majesty did not want candy, so he gave it to her. Butler replies then he should order something else to be prepared for the office, and Amelia says thanks to him. And Butler asks her, is she feeling unwell? She skipped her meal, and she looked rather pale. Then Amelia asks him how can she earn His Majesty's recognition. He asks her, did something happen? But she says nothing at all and questions how could His Majesty possibly like her, a daughter of the Valletta family? And he wonders that the time has come. Has Lady Emilia realized His Majesty's true feelings? Amelia explains sadly that she truly wants to be a maid who is helpful to His Majesty, but she does not think she can read what His Majesty wants very well. And Butler thinks himself that he fully understands Lady Amelia's position. However, then on Earth is this candy basket. That precious item is something only made for the imperial family on special occasions. Is it possible to torment someone with something like that? And he asks her, did His Majesty happen to say something else? And she tells him Emperor said that she is his responsibility. Since he asked it, that was difficult to understand, and she says she could not ask for any more details. And Butler wonders that not the office, but His Majesty's responsibility. Ad thinks, what is His Majesty's intention? Is he projecting his hatred for the North onto Lady Amelia? And he thinks that he guesses no. He concludes internally that the Emperor has already accepted her in his own way. Amelia, still uncertain, believes that judging by the look in his eyes, perhaps that is not entirely true. Yet when she recalls his gaze, she admits it carried happiness. Butler pauses, contemplative, unsure how to interpret the subtle nuances between the two. Butler thinks the conversation is strangely difficult to follow. There must be something happening beneath the surface that he is not yet aware of. Setting that aside, he clears his throat and addresses Amelia, explaining that being recognized by the ruler of the empire is no easy feat. There is no clear sign or method to know whether one has truly earned that recognition or not. Amelia remains silent. Internally, she reflects that perhaps she has been too hasty. 5 years of hostility toward the North cannot possibly be resolved in a matter of days. Still, a Valletta does not surrender so easily. Her father trained every day without fail, always preparing for monsters that could appear at any moment. As a fellow Valletta, she must maintain the same resolve, even when facing the monster known as Emperor Klaiden's malice. The head chamberlain gently tells her that time will eventually resolve everything, especially since she is clearly doing her absolute best. Amelia acknowledges his words respectfully. Privately, Butler reflects on his 30 years of service. If a woman stands beside Klaiden Locarso at his bedside, her fate is sealed that very day. A man who did not even blink after killing a divine beast would never hesitate over a mere maid. Yet, this situation feels different from simply being on the Emperor's bad side. For now, Butler decides he will help her. He notes that it is already past mealtime and encourages her to at least enjoy the candies. Amelia admits quietly that she thinks she might actually dislike sweets. Later, Klaiden sits alone in his chamber when Butler appears. Butler's eyes immediately catch the books placed neatly near the Emperor. Observing Klaiden carefully, Butler wonders if he is seeing things. First the candy basket, and now this His Majesty is attending to state affairs even during personal hours. Butler questions whether it is finally time for him to retire, or whether Klaiden has at last divided pleasure from responsibility and begun to mature into a truly great emperor. Klaiden notices Butler's stare and asks what he is there for. Butler explains that he has come regarding the maid. As ordered, Miss Emilia will serve as Klaiden's exclusive maid starting tomorrow, attending him in the office, training grounds, gardens, and even the bedchamber. Klaiden agrees, then pauses at the mention of the bedchamber. Butler clarifies that this is the meaning of an exclusive maid. Klaiden questions when she would ever rest under such conditions. Butler responds that in that case, bedchamber duties will remain with Madame Gallier as usual. Klaiden asks if that was Butler's true purpose for coming. Butler admits that if he had not intervened, Madame Gallier would have lost her lifelong position, and Miss Emilia would likely have collapsed from exhaustion. Klaiden sighs, noting that Amelia already seems quite worn out. Butler informs him that Amelia skipped dinner entirely and did not even touch the candies that were discarded for her. He acknowledges that it was a mistake by the kitchen. Klaiden dismisses the concern, insisting that Amelia is obsessed with sweets and likely ate too many desserts earlier, leaving her without appetite. He even thinks she can be rather childish at times. Yet almost immediately, another thought crosses his mind. He recalls Amelia saying she dislikes sweets. Butler hesitates, unsure which version to believe. He asks if Amelia ever explicitly said she liked candy. Klaiden responds incredulously, wondering if there is anyone in the Empire who dislikes the head chef Villamoya's handmade candies. Butler reasons that while nobles undeniably adore those sweets, perhaps the North is different. He offers that his own wife, being from the North, never grew up with such confections and finds their pure sweetness unpleasant. Then he adds that if it were Miss Amelia, she would probably claim even worms were crunchy and delicious if it pleased His Majesty. After all, she is a loyal Valletta. He wonders aloud if that loyalty is the reason Klaiden chose her as his office maid. Klaiden asks what he means by that. Butler explains that he assumed the Emperor valued the patience of Northerners and therefore kept Amelia close. Privately, Butler suspects something darker that through her, Klaiden intends to take revenge on Margrave Valletta. Klaiden responds coolly, stating that he is merely giving proper rewards to those who work hard for the Empire, and asks if Butler finds fault in that. Butler immediately denies any issue. Klaiden turns away and dismisses him for the day. Butler departs, thinking that while the Emperor did not openly reveal his thoughts regarding House Valletta, his stance remains firm and his true intentions impossible to read. The next day, after the State Council meeting, Amelia enters the office. Klaiden is speaking with the chief administrator, who is explaining that closing the cave near Valletta territory is impossible because the bridge leading there has collapsed, making construction unfeasible. Klaiden retorts that he ordered the cave closed due to a monster wave and questions how a bridge intact yesterday could collapse today. He finds the explanation nonsensical. The administrator admits that the cause of the collapse has not yet been determined. Klaiden responds dryly, noting that of course it hasn't. Amelia observes quietly, realizing the meeting must have involved heated debate over the cave near Valletta territory. Though she doesn't know the exact details, she can tell Klaiden is deliberately tormenting them. Embarrassingly, she feels a strange sense of solidarity. There are others enduring his pressure just as she is. The administrator then announces that Marquis Maloy's rune requests an audience. Klaiden is visibly surprised, repeating the name in disbelief before allowing him to enter. Amelia watches him carefully as his expression sharpens. Klaiden thinks about Maloy's rune. The man must have witnessed the clash between Klaiden and the military nobles earlier that day. Those nobles' families that grew powerful through privilege during the former emperor's reign were the same ones who demanded Klaiden's execution during his exile in the north. They are now his enemies. House Rune is also a military noble family, yet, since Maloy's rune inherited the title, they no longer fit neatly into that faction. Still, despite seeing Klaiden openly oppose the military nobles in his first council meeting, Rune has come directly to his office. As the man enters and greets him, Klaiden watches closely, his mind already calculating. Maloy's rune's next move will reveal everything. Manhwa's rune of the Marquis rune family, one of the military nobles, stands before the emperor. He is young, carrying the title of Marquis at an early age. As Amelia looks at him, she wonders if this is truly Marquis rune. She recalls hearing about the dispute between His Majesty and the military nobles earlier that day and cannot understand what Manhwa intends by appearing here immediately after the morning State Council. Her thoughts drift back to the council meeting. The emperor had declared that the source of the recent demonic beast wave lay within the caves near northern Valletta territory and ordered them sealed. Duke Brondel, head of the military nobles, had responded that the bridge at Holoton, the gateway to the north, had collapsed, making construction impossible. Malawaz, seated among the nobles at the time, had questioned this silently. That bridge had stood firm even through earthquakes. Its sudden collapse could only mean that Duke Brondel was scheming to defy the emperor's orders. The emperor had replied calmly that this was truly unfortunate, then declared that as a gift commemorating his coronation, Duke Brondel would oversee the bridge repairs and the sealing of the cave ceiling. Duke Brondel had protested, insisting he had already presented a gift, namely the woodlands of Hezebron, which he had offered upon the emperor's ascension. The emperor had countered that this was merely Duke Brondel's belief and that he had received nothing he desired. When Duke Brondel expressed confusion, the emperor repeated that he had received nothing at all. Count Dallas, an imperial elder noble, had attempted to calm the situation by suggesting the matter be discussed later, but the emperor had said nothing further. At that moment, Malawaz had thought that the emperor had completely lost his mind. He had heard that when Klaiden Locarso lived in the palace, he was a brilliant crown prince, even if not particularly diligent. Yet the first act of his reign had been throwing a tantrum over gifts. The emperor is 24 this year, yet Malawaz wondered if he had left 20 of those years behind in the north. In Malawaz's mind, the emperor's mental age seemed closer to 4. Now, back in the emperor's office, Malawaz stands before him. The administrator notices Emilia's presence and wonders if her immediate appearance, after the earlier chaos, is a political statement. Perhaps she intends to side with His Majesty. Malawaz greets the emperor respectfully, but the emperor responds curtly, ordering him to wait on the sofa. He then tells the administrator to finish the report and asks about the situation regarding Holoton's bridge and Hezebron's woodland. The administrator is taken aback by the emperor's behavior. Treating Marquirun in such a manner is unthinkable. As Malawaz waits on the sofa, the administrator explains that Duke Brondel's offered woodland is vast and yields high-quality timber. The emperor remarks that the land was originally bestowed upon Brondel by Emperor Tashim, and that reclaiming it means the duke has not truly given him anything. The administrator is internally stunned by this forced logic. The emperor continues, asking whether repairing a single broken bridge and filling in a cave is truly such an unreasonable request, especially when framed as a coronation gift. Malawaz interjects, questioning what Lord Holoton has been doing while leaving the bridge unrepaired. He privately thinks that even a 4-year-old would be more mature. The emperor turns to him and asks whether he is wrong. Malawaz answers that His Majesty is not wrong and approaches him, but the emperor ignores him and tells the administrator that he surely has more urgent matters to attend to. The administrator is shocked, momentarily speechless. Malawaz returns to the sofa. The administrator resumes his report, explaining that he has prepared the construction estimates as requested, noting that transportation costs vary by season and should be considered. The emperor responds that during the government affairs meeting, everyone seemed to know details of the cave construction estimates, details that had been reported only to him days ago in the chief administrative office. He questions how information is leaking so carelessly from an office that exists solely to execute imperial commands, remarking that it seems there is no one in the capital who does not know. The administrator promises immediate action. The emperor then declares that the Imperial Guard Knights will be sent to the Chief Administrative Office to conduct an investigation. He frames it as assistance this time, but warns that next time their arrival will signify wrongdoing. He instructs Chief Administrator Clavel to pay strict attention to security. The administrator agrees, though when he glances at Malawaz, he feels as though stars are falling from the sky. Malawaz smiles faintly, a smile that silently tells him to work harder. The administrator feels an eye spasm coming on. The emperor asks if the administrator is all right. The administrator replies that he understands the chief administrative office exists solely for His Majesty. The emperor tells him he will remember those words and dismisses him. The administrator withdraws. Amelia observes silently, thinking that the Marquis appears to be lacking magnesium. The Emperor instructs her to serve tea to the Marquis, and she complies. As Malawaz watches Amelia pour the tea, he finds the silence suffocating. The only thing moving in the office is the northern handmaid, maintaining her calm demeanor even now. She is the only person he has met in the palace today who seems completely unfazed. Then again, he reasons, a handmaid from the north would not know much about state affairs. The Emperor approaches Malawaz and bluntly suggests that he could not have come merely to stare at his handmaid's figure. Malawaz is startled and questions what he means, wondering internally if the Emperor is serious or merely teasing. He forces himself to refocus. No matter how childish or erratic the man appears, the person before him is Emperor Klaiden Locarso. Malawaz recalls the legends of his youth, rumors of reckless scandals, peerless swordsmanship, noble ladies' fervent admiration, and the sinner who killed a divine beast. These were the stories of Crown Prince Klaiden. He remembers thinking the claim that the Crown Prince alone defeated the demonic beasts was absurd exaggeration. Like other military nobles, he had suspected Margrave Valletta of siding with the Crown Prince and believed an investigation was warranted. Still, Malawaz had respected the fact that the abandoned royal had stepped forward to suppress the beasts. What he never imagined was that the Emperor would be so petty and childish. Watching the chaos unfold in the office, Malawaz feels deep regret. He realizes he gambled the fate of the entire succession on someone who appears to have the mind of a 4-year-old. The Emperor sits back in his chair. Malawaz steps forward and explains that regarding the construction estimates for sealing the Eastern Palace caves, the matter could have been concluded easily. By ordering the Chief Administrative Office first, Malawaz deduces that the Emperor intended for rumors to spread deliberately in order to purge spies within the administration. Malawaz concludes internally that regardless of whether the sealing order is fully carried out, the Emperor has seized the initiative against the nobles. The new Emperor is either completely mad or frighteningly brilliant. He remarks that if the Imperial Guard Knights sent by His Majesty are reliable, only 1 or 2 senior administrators may remain by the next day. The Emperor responds casually that the situation is much the same here, as there is only 1 person left in his room at present. Malawaz is confused. The Emperor corrects himself, saying there are 2, since Amelia, being the daughter of Margrave Valletta, is more than worthy to stand beside Malawaz. Malawaz then warns that he has heard the Emperor has expelled attendants from influential noble families. This has already stirred much talk, and if His Majesty continues to suppress the nobility so openly, the backlash will only intensify. The Emperor sighs and states that he does not care, arguing that those attendants simply acted in ways that warranted removal. Malawaz counters that keeping attendants from various families close has long been a method of maintaining harmony with the nobility. The Emperor cuts him off, declaring that Amelia alone is enough for him. Malawaz is stunned. The Emperor repeats himself, emphasizing that Amelia alone suffices. As Malawaz stands there, he wonders whether the Emperor even listened to a word he said. Entrusting the future of the Rune family to this man, he questions whether it was ever the right choice. The position of main maid, the closest post to the Emperor, is none other than the very center of a battlefield. Amelia remembers her father gripping her shoulders before her departure and warning her that the Imperial Palace is a place where true friends do not exist. He had told her never to let herself be swept into the palace's turmoil, never to protect their family's interests, and to simply live like a shadow until she could return home. That, he said, was the only duty she must perform for the North and for him. Until that day came, he would stand guard upon the fortress walls himself. Remembering those words, Amelia realizes what her father truly meant. He would be unable to sleep from worry, because the Imperial Palace he knows is, without a doubt, hell on earth. As she looks between the Emperor and Malawaz, she reminds herself once more that her work must be flawless, yet her presence must remain no more than a shadow. Malawaz turns his gaze to the Emperor, who asks him what his true business is. Since he has already drunk Amelia's tea, the Emperor declares that his purpose must be worthy of that cup. Malwa senses fierce protectiveness in his tone, especially in how he emphasizes that Amelia alone is sufficient. He wonders if the emperor intends to purge all other aides. With no choice but to clarify the emperor's true intentions before proceeding further, Malwa explains that, as a gift for his majesty's enthronement, House Rune has offered a chest of Luga's pearls. A gift so costly that his family will be paying off the debt for the next 3 years. Upon hearing this, the emperor reacts with laughter, referring to the Luga's pearls and mocking their size, calling it little more than a palm-sized fox. He questions whether Malwa came out of fear that he would be extorted for even more. Malwa admits that the emperor has already guessed correctly, adding that it would benefit his majesty to have at least one faction of the military nobility on his side. He explains that he came to propose reconciliation. The emperor responds that House Rune's military strength is plausible, but points out that their territory lies far to the east. By the time conflict erupts with Duke Brondel or other warlords, House Rune would arrive too late. He remarks that Malwa has barely returned to the capital, yet he is already weighing military assets and leverage. If House Rune is not present when truly needed, the emperor questions what use they are. He reminds Malwa again that he must prove himself worthy of Emilia's tea. Malwa feels as though each conversation with the emperor drains the life from him. He cannot fathom how a mere maid endures this man's presence. His gaze shifts to Amelia, and he thinks the emperor watches her like a vulture eyeing a corpse. She is the only person the emperor has kept close, which makes it obvious that she is no ordinary maid. The emperor remarks that Malwa looks as though he is on the verge of a nervous breakdown and casually adds that he will have to keep Malwa alive since he already owns him. Malwa asks whether his majesty is always this reckless. The emperor responds ambiguously, neither confirming nor denying it. Malwa recalls rumors that the new emperor drives the women of the empire mad, yet he feels himself going mad in a very different way. He concludes that if neither a box of pearls nor House Rune's troops have any value, then Malwa's rune clearly lacks the ability to please his majesty. The emperor agrees. Malwa then asks for permission to withdraw, but the emperor refuses. Confused, Malwa wonders what the emperor truly wants from him. The emperor then instructs Amelia to cover her ears. She offers to step outside if the matter is sensitive, but he stops her, telling her to stay and simply plug her ears so she cannot hear a thing. Amelia wonders if this is yet another of His Majesty's whims. She recalls her father's words about living like a shadow and returning home. If this is her battlefield, she cannot retreat. She complies, turning her back and covering her ears. Holding his cup of tea, Malwa wonders what kind of situation this has become. The emperor asks him for his opinion of Margrave Valletta. Malwa realizes that, in the end, the emperor made Emilia do this simply to assess her father right in front of her. The absurdity leaves him unable even to feel angry. He answers honestly that if Margrave Valletta had not held the line, the empire as it exists today might not exist at all, and that the security of the northern border is entirely thanks to him. The emperor falls silent, his gaze fixed on Amelia. Watching him, Malwa wonders why he is being ignored. For a childish prank, the emperor's eyes are far too serious. The noise in the room slowly transforms into a melody, and Malwa realizes that the emperor is listening intently. It is a northern folk song. After some time, the emperor asks whether it is beautiful. Malwa agrees, and the emperor declares it the correct answer. When Malwa reacts in confusion, the emperor tells him to forget everything else and listen carefully. He reveals that Duke Brondel is not the one who destroyed the Holiton Bridge, that someone else is responsible, and that the evidence has already been secured. He orders Malwa to leave quietly, explaining that he wishes to listen her the song a little longer. He warns that if today's conversation leaks, the Imperial Guard will be dispatched without hesitation, even if the distance is great. Malwa rises, acknowledges the order, and leaves. And thinks what kind of conversation was that? As he walks away, he thinks bitterly that he does not understand why his late father never told him that the Crown Prince was a complete lunatic. Amelia wonders whether she should stop now that the Marquis has gone. The emperor tells her that at northern festivals, she always sings that song first. She asks how he knows. He explains that during festival season, taverns speak of nothing else, and he could not help but hear. He tells her to continue. He then presents her with a box. Emilia looks down at it and quietly wonders what it could be. The emperor asks Amelia to open the box. She answers obediently and lifts the lid. Inside rests a handkerchief. The emperor explains that during the last training session, the chief administrative officer took her handkerchief and has still not returned it. He tells her to use this one instead, adding that even if the original is returned later, she should throw it away because it has already been contaminated. Amelia asks why His Majesty would give her something like this. The emperor steps closer and says that since the chief administrative officer used hers during work, he is merely compensating her and asks whether his judgment is wrong. Amelia answers that it is not. She notices how close his face is and adds that the handkerchief feels far too precious. The emperor leans in further and says that since she understands its value, he expects her to find it even more useful. He tells her she may show her gratitude as much as she likes, and that he will allow that much. Amelia looks down at the handkerchief, then bows her head and says that she will accept it with gratitude. The emperor asks if she is serious. Confused, she asks what he means. He asks again whether she is truly grateful. At that, Amelia feels unsettled. She wonders whether the meaning of gratitude is different in the capital and why His Majesty is behaving this way. Meanwhile, the emperor thinks that the question itself is ridiculous, yet he feels compelled to ask. He remembers how he thought she liked sweets, only for things to turn out differently before. He wonders whether luxury items hold any meaning for Amelia at all. As Amelia touches the handkerchief, she thinks about how incredibly soft it is and how high its quality feels. She considers sending it to her younger brother Horace in the north. Since coming to the imperial palace, she has not been able to send a single distant gift home. If she sent this, her family would surely believe she is doing well. She thinks that His Majesty is unexpectedly thoughtful. She then answers that yes, she is truly grateful. The emperor falls silent, turns away, and says that dealing with a group of stubborn old men has left him exhausted. He announces that he is heading to his chambers and tells her she may return as well. Amelia bows and takes her leave. As he watches her go, the emperor thinks that Emilia Valletta's sense of touch is perfectly fine. He recalls the expression she made earlier and realizes that she can make such a face. He finds the thought unexpectedly charming and concludes that he will be able to sleep soundly tonight. The next morning, Amelia arrives at the office to find the emperor already in the middle of a meeting. Seeing the number of people present, she realizes they must have gathered to settle the matter of the cave construction raised in the previous day's political meeting. For so many high-ranking nobles to flock here at once, they must be trying to pressure His Majesty into bending to their will. Yet she knows that the emperor has no intention of yielding. She recognizes it immediately as a battle of wills. She notices several nobles clearing their throats. The emperor then remarks bluntly that none of them can stand being ignored. He addresses the Lord of Holoton directly and asks whether bridge construction has begun. Count Loragard answers hesitantly that it has. Looking at Count Loragard, the emperor thinks that he is the second in command among the military nobles. He knows that the one who destroyed the Holoton Bridge was none other than Count Loragard himself. Both the Loragard and Brondel families are military nobles, yet the Loragards share blood ties with the Empress Dowager and rose under her backing, while Duke Brondel was a longtime friend of the former emperor who used that relationship as his stepping stone. Because of their differing political foundations, they acted as checks against one another, though they always allied when it came to shared interests. To the emperor, however, they are all the same. Count Loragard begins to speak about the matter, but Duke Brondel cuts in, saying that they have come precisely to discuss that issue. The emperor tells them coldly that the answer they give had better be one he wants to hear. Amelia thinks to herself how His Majesty openly looks down on both the Duke and the Count in front of everyone. It is clear to her that he intends to break their spirit one way or another. Duke Brondel explains that there has still been no discovery regarding where magic beasts breed or where they originate. Each new wave appears from a different point of origin, and they believe that cave is not worth reconsidering at this time. The emperor responds sharply, asking whether they are implying that he, a young and inexperienced emperor, knows nothing and is speaking nonsense. Duke Brondel hastily denies it, saying it is only that His Majesty's youthful vigor only to be cut off. The emperor retorts that if not for his youthful vigor, magic beasts would be frolicking in the palace gardens right now, and these lords would be out in the field leading armies, eating and sleeping on bare ground. He asks whether that is not the truth. Manhwa, sipping his tea from the side, thinks that the emperor has left them completely speechless, just as expected. Emilia watches the nobles and thinks that although they claim the cave has no value in defending against magic beasts, the person who understands magic beast waves best is undoubtedly His Majesty. The emperor hums thoughtfully. Emilia looks at him and realizes that it is only natural his understanding of magic beasts far surpasses hers. Even though she is from the north, His Majesty possesses experience these nobles have never achieved in their entire lives. He is the one who fought magic beasts and emerged victorious Klaiden Locarso, who did not merely defeat a single beast, but repelled an entire wave alone back when he was crown prince. Even now, as someone from the north, Amelia remembers that day vividly. The era of demonic beast waves rises vividly in memory, returning Amelia to the northern Valletta territory years ago. A knight appears suddenly, his face drained of color, shouting that a demonic beast has appeared. Another knight reacts in disbelief and asks whether he truly means a beast. The first knight confirms it, saying that it is a wave-class threat, so vast it practically blankets the entire mountain range. Someone asks whether this is happening right now. At that moment, Prince Klaiden appears like a phantom. He borrows 3 knights, advances without hesitation, and suppresses the beast in a single breath. A knight present that day later says that he will never witness such a spectacle again in his lifetime. The Crown Prince's performance is terrifying beyond words. Equally famous is the anecdote of Klaiden refusing the title of swordmaster. When told of the honor, he asks whether accepting such a trivial title would improve his swordsmanship in any way, and whether such a thing is even possible. It is an arrogant declaration, one that implies he has already transcended the highest peak of martial arts. Yet neither then nor now does anyone step forward to refute him, because even such arrogance is forgivable. Amelia reflects that this is simply because the Crown Prince's skill is undeniable. Until then, humanity has never achieved a complete victory against demonic beasts. When swarms pour into human lands, the Margrave blocks them in the north while warlord nobles deploy troops from the rear. This is the Empire's standard countermeasure, but it amounts to little more than driving the beasts away. The warlord nobles are permitted excessively large standing armies for defense, but if the Emperor were to hunt down all the beasts by himself, they fear they would be forced to surrender their military power. Duke Brondel begins to say that His Majesty's victory has certainly saved many subjects, but the Emperor cuts him off and asks whether he means only commoners. When the Duke reacts in confusion, the Emperor explains that he believes he saved the Dukes as well, so that they and their soldiers may continue living with warm backs and full bellies. Duke Brondel thinks to himself how openly sarcastic this is. Manhwa then adds that regarding the cave, he also believes it is best to seal it. Count Loragard reacts sharply, but Manhwa continues, saying that sealing the cave will allow them to know exactly where to defend and where they must concentrate their forces when the beasts return. From a long-term perspective, he believes the issue is worth serious consideration. The Emperor reacts with satisfaction, asking why the other dukes cannot understand as Manhwa does. Manhwa thinks that at this rate, the elder nobles will collapse from high blood pressure. He suggests that they postpone the discussion and continue tomorrow. The other dukes sigh and leave. The Emperor also prepares to leave, but Manhwa stops him and remarks that his expression earlier looked exactly like the former emperor's. He adds that the resemblance likely made their faces rot even faster. The Emperor snaps back, asking what nonsense he is spouting and declares that he is obviously far more handsome, making comparison impossible. Malraux thinks that the man is insane and feels genuinely dizzy every time he behaves like this. Glancing at the maid, he wonders how she remains so calm and resolves to ask her secret someday. First, he must regain his composure. He then tells the emperor that he provoked the nobles excessively, and that the pride they take in dedicating their lives to driving beasts from the continent is their breakfast, lunch, and dinner. The emperor responds that he swept away the beasts with his own 2 hands, and for his meals he eats whatever he wants. Malraux presses a hand to his head. The emperor then asks why the marquis is still standing there. Malraux replies that it would have been better to reach a moderate compromise earlier. The emperor cuts him off, asking again why he is not leaving, and dismisses the idea of compromise entirely, saying the nobles only try to do exactly as they please. The bluntness shocks both Emilia and Malraux. The emperor adds that the true child is the one who does whatever he wants. He then asks Malraux why he is staring so intently. Malraux denies it, but notices Emilia leaving and thinks that the maid fled faster than a demonic beast, leaving him behind. He tells the emperor that when the council reconvenes, the nobles will raise the bridge construction again. The emperor replies that it is only natural that the one who destroyed it rebuilds it. Malraux warns that they will likely argue that since the cause of the collapse is unknown, all transport facilities in the empire must be inspected to prepare for the next wave, with costs shared equally by all territories. The emperor realizes they intend to stall for time and asks what will happen to his gift. Malraux covers his face and says seriously that it has not even been a month since the coronation. He notes that even the former emperor listened carefully to advice. The emperor replies that those men were his father's friends, not his own, and tells Malraux to forget it. His throat feels dry. He asks where Amelia is. Malraux stands and says she stepped out to clear the tableware, and that he will summon Lady Valletta. As he leaves, the emperor thinks that if Malraux is correct, the transport inspections and cave construction will drag on for 5 years. All of this just because they do not want to pay for one bridge. He thinks the old men are like snakes, and the thought makes his throat even drier. He wonders where Amelia is and then grows irritated, thinking how dare she make the emperor wait. About 3 minutes pass. Malraux suddenly returns and asks whether His Majesty requires anything. The emperor says no. Other maids appear with tea and refreshments, and one asks whether he should drink some tea. The emperor orders everything cleared away except for a simple meal. Everyone leaves. Alone in the room, he sinks into thought. He wonders where on earth Amelia is wandering. Official duties are finished, yet she is nowhere to be seen. It does not suit her nature to slack off secretly. He considers whether she went to eat something specific, then dismisses the thought, remembering how terrible her sense of taste is. He wonders where she could be. He realizes, with irritation, that he knows almost nothing about Amelia. At times like this, she reminds him of demonic beasts hiding their presence for long periods before erupting without warning. Humans must always prepare for them. She is just as unpredictable, forcing him to prepare as well. He catches himself and thinks there is a difference. Amelia is perfect. He stops himself abruptly and decides he has waited too long and is hallucinating from dehydration. He resolves not to drink water, choosing to remain thirsty so that when Amelia returns, he can be justifiably angry. After a while, Amelia finally appears, holding a tray of tea. She apologizes for keeping His Majesty waiting. The emperor asks whether she has brought thyme and tea, and at the same time he recognizes the scent. Thyme and tea is a common beverage in the north, not a luxury sought by nobles, which makes it difficult to find in the capital. Because of this, he is certain that she personally brought it from the north. As Amelia serves the tea and he takes a sip, he wonders why, even though he tries to maintain his anger, his heart softens the moment he tastes the tea filled with memories. He questions why she brewed it so well. He remarks that it took her a long time to prepare it. Amelia apologizes and explains that she was late because she had an urgent stop to make. He wonders what kind of urgent stop could have been important enough to prioritize over his command. He takes another sip of tea and dizziness washes over him. Noticing this, Amelia asks whether he is all right and whether she should summon a physician. He dismisses it and tells her to forget it. Amelia insists that he has been overworking recently and expresses concern that there may be an issue with his health. She says that if she, who has served him longer than anyone else, were to overlook this, she would be unqualified to be his maid. She declares that she will bring a physician immediately. The emperor responds that if she thinks Klaiden Locarso has a health defect, then she must see him as a frail man. Amelia replies that when she was young, she believed her father was the strongest and most terrifying being in existence, yet even he often suffered injuries and illness. Through this, she learned that it is only natural for humans to have moments of weakness. The emperor asks whether she is implying that he, too, is merely human. He steps closer and states that he killed a divine beast with his own hands, and that although he received punishment, there was no divine retribution from the gods. He claims that his exile was actually an opportunity. Amelia explains that she spoke only out of a desire to care for him to the best of her ability. The emperor asks whether she means caring for him like a child. She tries to deny it, but he interrupts and tells her to prove it by taking care of him now. He demands to know where she went. Amelia explains that she went to the Imperial Library. When he questions this, she elaborates that she checked the maps regarding the cave where the demonic beast appeared. She verified that a rocky mountain lies directly adjacent to it and that the cave runs beneath the mountain. In other words, the cave is structurally unstable, and a strong shock could cause it to collapse. She admits that it may be difficult to believe her word alone and suggests checking the maps. As the emperor begins to speak her name, Amelia immediately apologizes, stating that it was improper for a mere maid to suggest strategy regarding such an event. She announces that she will withdraw. The emperor orders her to stay, stating that he has not dismissed her yet. He thinks that Emilia Valletta has brought him the solution. If she is correct, a few concentrated fire spells from the Imperial mages could bring down the mountain and seal the cave. Since he would not need to rely on the nobles, he could assert imperial authority and make them wither in fear. He asks her why she helped him. Amelia replies that she believes blocking the cave is the right course of action, but also acknowledges that Marquis Marloy's advice to harmonize with the nobles is valid. She asks him to pretend she was never there and leaves. As he watches her go, he thinks that the reason for Amelia's caution is not difficult to deduce. He recalls Marloy's words about purging every servant from his inner circle who had ties to influential families. At present, his only personal attendant is Emilia Valletta, which means that all the jealousy and resentment of those who are exiled is focused on her. Following Marloy's logic, he realizes that the warlord nobles will punish the empire through the transport maintenance project, using bridge repair as a pretext to force every territory to share the cost. The Valletta territory is in such dire straits that they had to offer their daughter to the palace, making Emilia's intervention likely an attempt to save her territory from financial ruin. He concludes that if she had waited past tonight, he would have found a solution himself. Still, he mutters that she should have done it for him. The next morning, breakfast is served. Amelia greets him, but he looks unwell and does not acknowledge her. She thinks that this is her fault for daring to intervene in state affairs. Even without that, she believes he must harbor ill will toward House Valletta due to his exile in the north. She reflects that her intervention in the cave issue was not solely to protect her family. When His Majesty killed the divine beast, people exiled the crown prince out of fear that the empire would suffer divine punishment. Now, they fear that the emperor will seek revenge on the nobles for exiling him. She believes that His Majesty can reconcile with the past and make the empire leap forward. This belief forms the loyalty she promised to him. She resolves to apologize as soon as possible. When she addresses him, he tells her to stop and leave him alone for now. She is surprised. He tells her again that it would be best if she returned in the afternoon, then corrects himself and says they will speak tomorrow. She dares to ask forgiveness, but he cuts her off. She bows and begs forgiveness for the third time, but he rudely refuses again. As she speaks once more, Marloy suddenly rushes into the room and asks where Maurice is. He explains that he sent word to the tower master, but it will take time. The emperor angrily questions whether this is something that should be said at this moment. Marlois explains that the chief mage is setting up a high-level barrier for a dangerous experiment and asks what is happening, noting that the emperor looks pale. The emperor declares that he will summon another maid immediately and insists that his complexion is usually perfect. Marlois agrees, but hesitates. The emperor interrupts and orders him to tell the tower master to proceed even if it means destroying magical power, stating that it is his command. Marlois agrees and leaves the room. Left alone, the emperor holds his head and mutters in anger. When he raises his head, Maurice Rabin, the chief mage of the Imperial Magic Tower, appears and asks why he was summoned. The emperor coldly remarks that Maurice is late. And demands to know what took him so long. Maurice reacts with confusion, explaining that he came as soon as the summons reached him, but because of it, the Magic Tower Master ended up breaking his barriers, which he finds extremely annoying. The emperor responds with a non-committal sound, clearly unwell. Maurice notices his condition and asks what is wrong with him, remarking that now that he is emperor, no one should dare trouble him. The emperor snaps that Maurice himself is messing with him. Maurice, startled, insists that they literally just saw each other. The emperor adds that even his maid is messing with him. Maurice is baffled and internally observes that the emperor is a complete wreck. He realizes that the chief attendant and even the office maids have been dismissed. The emperor angrily questions whether Maurice truly deserves to be called the chief mage. Maurice protests, asking what he has even done wrong, noting that after 5 years apart the emperor starts yelling the moment they meet. The emperor offers him a cup of tea. Maurice refuses, asking whether it is the same tea the emperor has been drinking. When told that it is, Maurice demands a fresh one, explaining that he does not want to make a fuss or indirectly mock the emperor like everyone else. The emperor grows visibly irritated. Maurice casually asks who the new maid is and whether she is pretty. The emperor orders him to drink the tea, stating that he has not even touched it himself. Maurice reluctantly complies, drinks it, and immediately complains that it tastes strange. The emperor explains that it is Taiman tea and that this is how it tastes, adding that it is beneficial for one's health. Maurice instantly declares that the tea is poisoned and demands to know whether the emperor has lost his mind, asking whether he has truly been drinking poisoned tea while doing paperwork. The emperor tells him to shut up, scoffing at the idea that poison could ever harm him. Maurice counters that it absolutely could, remarking that anyone who has to look at the emperor might consider killing him at least once. He adds that since the emperor made him drink it, he assumes there is more to the situation. The emperor cuts him off and states that since Maurice tasted it himself, he should be able to determine the antidote precisely. Maurice collapses onto the sofa, thinking that while the emperor has always been arrogant, forcing himself to work while poisoned just to prove his endurance is beyond reason. Maurice prepares a detoxification spell and channels it toward the emperor. As the magic takes effect, the emperor notes that he can finally breathe properly again. Maurice observes that the emperor is a complete idiot and determines that the poison was not meant to kill but rather to inflict intense pain, a particularly nasty type. Maurice asks who brought the tea. The emperor answers that it was his maid. Maurice points out that this must be why the emperor summoned him instead of immediately arresting her. The emperor remarks that mages' minds are always either insane or brilliant. Maurice sarcastically accepts the compliment but questions how foolish the maid would have to be to attempt assassination with such a crude poison. The emperor sharply tells him to watch his mouth, insisting that she is innocent, intelligent, and cautious, and that she would never believe something like this could kill him. Maurice questions the emperor's tone and reiterates that wanting to assassinate him is a perfectly natural human reaction. The emperor clutches his head and insists that if Amelia intended to harm him, she would have chosen a different method. He reasons that the idea of poisoning him only to cure him later makes no sense, which proves that something is seriously wrong. Maurice agrees that something is off, but asks which family the maid belongs to, guessing Brondel or Loragard before realizing she is from House Valletta. He wonders aloud whether the emperor drove Marquis Valletta insane during his exile in the north. The Emperor abruptly asks how long Maurice has been hiding inside the magic tower barrier and why he is suddenly asking such questions. Maurice hesitates, confused. The Emperor grabs him by the collar and accuses him of hiding, pointing out that Maurice never once showed his face after the Emperor returned. He dismisses the excuse of experiments and accuses him of avoiding him. Maurice defends himself, saying that the Emperor assumes mages do nothing but slack off. The Emperor demands to know what Maurice hid because he feared the Emperor would do something insane upon returning. Maurice admits that he did fear that, believing the Emperor would come back and wipe everyone out after 5 years of exile. The Emperor asks whether Maurice thought he would wipe him out as well. Maurice clarifies that he thought the Emperor would order him to wipe everyone else out. He adds that while the Emperor is kind-hearted for a madman, he never expected him to care about Maurice personally. The Emperor tells him to stop insulting and praising him at the same time. Maurice refocuses on the poisoning incident and insists that whether the maid is responsible or not, she should be summoned and investigated. The Emperor refuses, stating that she is already in a bad mood. Maurice is internally stunned and wonders how the mood of a possible suspect could matter. He argues that Northerners do not set traps like this, they handle matters directly and confirm results themselves. He points out that the time and tea was something Emilia personally brought from the north and that investigating openly would almost certainly result in her being framed. Maurice realizes that the Emperor summoned the chief mage of the Locarso magic tower specifically to protect her. The Emperor confirms this and orders Maurice to find the real culprit, stating that the duties of the Emperor's personal maid do not include hunting poisoners. Maurice complains that this clearly falls under a mage's responsibilities. The Emperor reminds him that mages claim mana dwells in all things, meaning everything in the world is their concern. Maurice agrees, then asks bluntly what that woman truly is to him. The Emperor answers that she is his maid and an extremely troublesome one. Maurice accepts the order and says he will go to her quarters to investigate. The Emperor tells him to go at daybreak. Maurice agrees and adds that he would not disturb her rest. He then asks what the Emperor will do if the culprit turns out to be Duke Brondel or Count Loragard. The Emperor smiles and says nothing. Maurice accepts that as a sufficient answer. The next day, Emilia wakes and looks toward the window, realizing that the sun has risen even though she did not sleep at all. She remembers her father's warning never to be swept into the turmoil of the palace and to live like a shadow before returning home. She thinks that she should have listened and wonders how everything went so wrong. She recalls the gentle expression the Emperor wore as he tasted the time and tea, which proved that he did not despise the North entirely. That realization had made her genuinely happy. She only wanted to convey her sincerity, even a little, but now it feels too late. She thinks of herself as foolish. A presence appears outside her room. Maurice enters casually, remarking that even though it is the room of the Emperor's maid, it is not particularly impressive. He comments that people like them, who live isolated in the magic tower, tend to become overly sensitive. He decides to start by searching the drawers. As he examines her clothing, he is struck by how worn her pajamas are, noting that Valletta's poverty is one matter, but poisoning is another entirely. He then notices the time and tea box sitting openly and concludes that she was indeed framed. He reflects that his master is impossibly picky and mutters about mana dwelling in all things. At that moment, Amelia appears and freezes in shock. Maurice turns just as startled, holding her clothing and the tea box in his hands. Pointing at the items, he states that he came to find this, but realizes too late that he raised the wrong hand. Amelia stares at him in disbelief, thinking that this is not what it looks like. Maurice hurriedly tells Amelia that this is a misunderstanding and insists they should talk first. Amelia, however, coldly asks whether he knows what Northerners do to perverts like him. Maurice falters, caught off guard by the word, barely managing to repeat it in disbelief. Amelia explains that in the north, such men are bound tightly and hung from the tallest trees, left as perfect feeding grounds for crows. Maurice panics and repeats that he said it was a misunderstanding. Amelia counters that the capital also has plenty of excellent trees and declares that before she offers her neck to His Majesty, she will dispose of him herself. Maurice notices her clenched fist and realizes, with genuine alarm, that she intends to strike him. He has been hit many times in his life, but never like this, never with such clear intent, and certainly not aimed directly at his vital points. As Amelia begins attacking him, Maurice instinctively raises the hand holding the time and tea box to shield himself. The sight of the box instantly freezes her mid-motion. She stares at it in shock and demands to know why he has that. She explains that it belongs to His Majesty and that it is the only thing from the north that he genuinely likes. Maurice protests that she is speaking nonsense and explains that the box is evidence and cannot be returned. He finally introduces himself properly as Maurice, the chief mage of the Locarso imperial family, and not a suspicious pervert. Amelia demands to know what kind of evidence he means, stating that whatever he did until now is irrelevant. Maurice tells her that now is not the time for that and informs her that His Majesty was poisoned with the time and tea. Amelia stiffens immediately and asks whether His Majesty is safe. Maurice answers confidently that of course he is and reminds her that he personally detoxified him. Amelia falls silent. Then, slowly, she confirms whether Maurice is saying that His Majesty drank her tea and that it was poisoned. Maurice affirms this, explaining that he verified it himself and that poison was indeed present in the time and tea she brewed. He shows her the box and asks whether she used the tea powder from it. And she wonders that His Majesty must have hated Valletta even more than she thought. Amelia confirms that she did. Internally, her thoughts spiral. She realizes that His Majesty must harbor far deeper resentment toward House Valletta than she ever imagined. If she is branded a traitor, what will happen to her father and siblings in the north? Does His Majesty intend to wipe out House Valletta entirely? Maurice watches her closely and notices how her expression turns cold. Her sudden calm unsettles him. He asks whether she ever showed this tea to anyone else, remarking that maids often boast about items from their home territories. Amelia replies that she did not. She explains that the maids of the imperial palace all come from influential families and have no interest in the tea consumed by northern commoners. Maurice realizes that if she never showed it to anyone, then the only apparent suspect would be her. Amelia calmly states that they should go. Maurice asks where. She answers that she will offer her neck. Maurice stares at her in disbelief. He quickly tells her that His Majesty sent him to prove her innocence. Amelia is stunned and asks how that could be possible. From her perspective, collecting evidence only makes sense if she is already considered the culprit. Maurice corrects her and explains that it is the opposite. His Majesty sent him because he wants her innocence proven. Amelia cannot understand why the Emperor would do that for her. She reasons that since the box was in her possession the entire time, suspecting her would be the logical conclusion. And if His Majesty says she is not, then she is not, and above all. Maurice tells her bluntly that she does not have the face of a liar. More importantly, as the second in command of the Locarso magic tower, he knows with certainty that she is not the one who poisoned the tea. Amelia accepts this and asks whether he will be able to find the real culprit. Maurice confirms that he will. As he looks at her, he realizes something important. This maid is genuinely worried about the Emperor's safety. She has clearly not served him long enough to become desensitized. Anyone who had been by His Majesty's side long enough would have reacted with indifference, perhaps even grim acceptance, thinking that such an attack was inevitable. Amelia tells Maurice that if someone is targeting His Majesty, he must catch the culprit no matter what. She adds that she has already crossed a river she cannot return from and therefore can no longer serve as His Majesty's maid. Maurice is startled by the statement. A river she cannot return from? He does not understand what she means. He tells her he understands and that he will take the tea box and leave. Amelia stops him and speaks urgently, stating that whoever insulted the imperial family must be punished severely. At that moment, voices sound from outside the room. Someone cheerfully announces that they got it, addressing Amelia by name. Amelia is startled and asks whether the chief attendant just knocked, reminding him that this is a crime scene. The butler suddenly enters the room, followed closely by another young woman who declares that they should barge in and catch them in the act. The girl is revealed to be Lucia Lauragard, the niece of Count Lauragard. Emilia addresses the chief attendant in disbelief. He responds politely but cautiously, saying that there appears to have been some misunderstanding. Lucia scoffs at the word misunderstanding and claims she saw it with her own eyes. Emilia Valletta, an office maid, bringing a strange man into the sleeping quarters. Maurice remains silent. Lucia sneers and asks what kind of taste he has. The butler, alarmed, greets Maurice respectfully, recognizing him as the imperial chief mage and second-in-command of the Locarso magic tower. He internally panics, realizing that if this continues, Lucia Loragard might actually be killed on the spot. Lucia freezes in shock upon hearing Maurice's title. Maurice, now visibly annoyed, orders the chief attendant to arrest that woman. Lucia explodes in disbelief, demanding to know how she could be arrested when she is a Loragard. Maurice coolly wonders what exactly she expects him to do with that information. The butler attempts to calm the situation, insisting again that this must be a misunderstanding. Amelia, however, stares at Lucia, recalling how she cried in the hallway for 10 whole minutes on the day His Majesty returned when the office maid position was transferred to Amelia. That display had only been tolerated because Lucia was Count Loragard's niece. Amelia swears that she never invited Lord Maurice into her quarters. Lucia retorts that every adulterous woman says the same. Amelia calmly corrects her, pointing out that she is not married and therefore adultery is an incorrect term. Lucia flusters, claiming that is not the point. Amelia internally notes how distinctly northern her thinking seems in contrast to Lucia's accusations. Lucia continues, explaining that she saw Amelia returning to her room during work hours, became suspicious, followed her, and heard what sounded like a lover's quarrel. The butler echoes her confusion, noting that words like pervert are not typically used unless something inappropriate is happening. Lucia insists that when she looked inside, it appeared that Amelia was the one trying to pounce on Maurice, regardless of how rough northerners are. Amelia clenches her fist tightly and forces herself to hold back. Maurice steps in, stating that if Lucia suspects him, he will explain. He declares that he entered the room on His Majesty's orders and that the magic tower possesses a truth-revealing magical tool that can be used to verify everything. Lucia immediately agrees, saying that is exactly what she wants. Maurice smoothly adds that His Majesty has been craving northern flavors, and since Amelia possesses northern tea, he came to retrieve it. He displays the time and tea box and hands it back to Amelia, instructing her to brew it for His Majesty from now on. He then states that he will accompany Miss Loragard to retrieve the truth-revealing magical tool. Lucia suddenly shouts a sharp refusal. Amelia looks at her in confusion, her thoughts echoing a single question, why? Lucia abruptly declares that there is absolutely no need for that. Maurice asks what she means, and she immediately explains that the tea was made from northern grass trampled by magical beasts. She questions how something so filthy could ever be served to His Majesty and reaches out to snatch the tea box from Maurice's hands. Maurice swiftly dodges her grasp. Lucia freezes in shock, letting out a confused sound. Amelia calmly addresses Miss Loragard and explains that the beast wave only occurs once every few years. Timon is an animal plant, and beasts that did not even appear last year could not have trampled tea leaves harvested last year. Everyone present silently thinks that this detail hardly seems like the most important issue at the moment. Amelia continues, explaining again that the tea leaves are from last year's harvest. Lucia stumbles over her words, trying to correct herself, but Maurice watches her with quiet interest. He thinks that this maid has an unusual way of thinking and that someone like her might actually last a long time by His Majesty's side. Amelia then adds that this year, the northern fields were thoroughly soaked in the blood of the beasts His Majesty personally slew. She remarks that they can look forward to next year's harvest and wonders aloud what Timon tea grown from beast blood might taste like. She suggests, with unsettling calm, that they could drink it together. Lucia's thoughts seize on the words beast blood. Her face drains of color. She recoils and hurriedly moves away, shouting for space. She apologizes to Maurice, claiming she misunderstood him and insists that as a daughter of House Beauregard, she respects the magic tower and believes the chief mage's words without question. Maurice coolly asks whether that means she does not respect the North, or whether she does not believe Miss Amelia's explanation. Lucia turns back toward the tea box, forcing a smile, and claims that of course she respects it and believes everything was merely a trivial misunderstanding. She dismisses northern fields and such matters as irrelevant. Then, suddenly, she grabs Amelia's hand and declares that they should go to her room and drink the tea together as an apology. She announces that she, Lucia Beauregard, will personally have tea time with Amelia. The butler stares in disbelief, wondering what she is even talking about. Tea time of all things. Maurice, however, understands immediately. He thinks that she is essentially suggesting they die together. The one who poisoned the time in tea is Lucia Beauregard. Her reaction just now makes it obvious. Miss Amelia must have realized it too. Maurice already knows the truth, but he doubts Lucia intended to assassinate His Majesty. It is more likely an act driven by jealousy toward Amelia. By suggesting they drink the tea together, Lucia plans to destroy the evidence. She probably already has the antidote. If she takes it in advance, only Amelia will suffer. If she does not, she can later claim Amelia served her spoiled tea. Either way, it is a clever choice. Lucia tightens her grip on Amelia and excitedly repeats her invitation, saying tea time again and again, even offering to forgive Amelia for the crime of stealing His Majesty away. Maurice steps closer and interrupts sharply, questioning what she is even saying. He tells her to listen carefully. If she swears not to tell anyone about what happened today, he will let everything go. He even offers to pour out the tea in the box himself. Lucia looks at him in disbelief and asks whether he is serious. Maurice confirms that he is. Amelia's thoughts race. Lucia was clearly targeting her, not His Majesty. But the truth remains that His Majesty could have been harmed. Letting her go so easily feels wrong. She cannot accept that. She stops Maurice and asks him to wait. Her father's words echo in her mind: never get caught up in the chaos of the imperial palace, live like a shadow, and return home safely. She falls silent, saying nothing more. Lucia hurriedly demands a promise from Maurice. She insists he swear that he will say nothing, that she was never there, that she never saw Miss Amelia even once. Maurice agrees and tells her she may leave. Lucia beams in relief, asks him to keep his promise, and quickly exits the room. Maurice and the butler watch her leave. Maurice mutters, confused, asking what that was supposed to be. The butler explains that Lucia must have been deeply shocked after finally becoming a maid in His Majesty's office, only to be replaced by Miss Amelia. Maurice remarks that it must be difficult for the butler as well. The butler agrees quietly, then asks why Maurice is here in the first place and why Miss Beauregard was so obsessed with the tea box. Maurice silences him with a look. The butler then notices Amelia and calls her name. She responds calmly. He informs her that Chief Administrator Clavel has summoned her and assures her that she is safe. After the last council meeting, all chief administrators were dismissed except Clavel. Amelia replies that this is a relief and says she will be going. Maurice stops her and asks why she returned to this room instead of going straight to the office. Amelia explains that she needs to submit her resignation, which is why she came back to write it. Maurice repeats the word resignation in disbelief. Amelia explains that she was on her way to apologize because she committed a grave offense against His Majesty. That day, His Majesty was clearly different from usual. She remembers how he told her to stop and leave him alone. She believes he must have been furious because she forgot her place and dared to bring up cave construction, a mere maid interfering in state affairs. She is certain he would never tolerate such behavior. Therefore, she should beg forgiveness and quietly step down from her position. Maurice watches her in silence. He thinks that this maid barely reacts to personal attacks, yet she cannot tolerate incorrect wording or irrational nonsense. Something feels strange. She is deliberately avoiding mentioning Lucia Beauregard, even though she clearly knows who pushed her into this situation. Is it northern caution? No, it feels different. He realizes she might unexpectedly be a formidable opponent. Amelia's thoughts return to her father's words once more. Never get caught up in the chaos of the palace. Today, she saw nothing. She heard nothing. She is nothing but a shadow behind everything that happens within these walls. She finally speaks and tells Maurice that she will go to His Majesty now and that she will not forget his kindness today. Maurice reacts immediately, telling her she cannot. Amelia asks what he means. He answers firmly that she should not go, not today. Amelia blinks and asks for clarification, wondering why he is telling her not to go. She questions his reasoning. Maurice answers that it would be better if she simply rests today. Amelia immediately responds that there is something she must tell His Majesty. Maurice tells her not to worry about the poison tea served to the Emperor, saying His Majesty does not care about something so trivial. Amelia falls silent. She looks at him carefully and thinks that it is not trivial at all, is it? Maurice gives her a warning, telling her not to say things like worrying that His Majesty might die from poison, because he would find that extremely unpleasant. Amelia repeats the word unpleasant, confused. Maurice clears his throat and explains by imitating the Emperor's attitude, recalling how His Majesty sits upright every morning and drinks poison while saying that no poison could possibly do anything to him. Amelia nods and says she understands. Inside, she realizes that this means His Majesty must have been suffering from poison yesterday. The way he reacted to her back then was not because he was angry about the previous day, it was because of the poisoning. Maurice steps closer and tells her that she must have known His Majesty since his days in Valletta, so she should understand what he means. Amelia corrects him, saying she never met His Majesty when he was in Valletta and met him for the first time only at the Imperial Palace. Maurice pauses, then responds that he understands. He thinks to himself that, even if he were the Marquis of Valletta, he would never let his precious daughter meet someone like that. He then asks what she would like him to do about the incident from earlier and whether she has any request. Amelia reacts in confusion, asking what he means. Maurice reminds her of Lucia's situation and explains that as a special service, this is her chance. After a brief silence, Amelia replies that she is fine and does not want anything. Maurice accepts her answer and says that in that case, it is fine. He explains that His Majesty needs time to organize what he has learned, so he will not have time to handle state affairs today anyway. He tells her to get some rest. Amelia thanks him. She thinks that too many things happened in just one night, but if the magic tower is stepping in, His Majesty will be safe. She then remembers the butler's words about the chief administrator requesting that she visit his office. Chief Administrator Klaiden. Back in the Emperor's office, His Majesty sits in his chair, holding documents in his hand. Maurice appears behind him and asks what those papers are, jokingly telling him not to say they are orders to be sent to the magic tower. The Emperor tells him to just go fire off a few fireballs and come back. Maurice complains that the north is far and asks him to send someone else. He says he wants to get some fresh air, adding that he has not seen sunlight in days. He explains that the magic tower is cramped and he needs to calm everyone down before they cause trouble, noting that many mages tend to snap. The Emperor replies that this is not the point and asks why it took him so long, demanding to know what happened. Maurice begins listing information instead. He says that Amelia is unmarried, has no fiancé, and despite her status, she is extremely frugal, organized, and neat. He warns the Emperor not to say anything stupid in front of her, because she truly hates that. The Emperor stares at him in silence, thinking that he told him to find the culprit behind the poisoning, not to babble nonsense like this. He interrupts, saying that this is interesting, and asks whether Maurice ran into her. Maurice confirms that she suddenly barged in. The Emperor asks if he mentioned the tea. Maurice hesitates and admits that he did, explaining that if he had not, he would have been labeled a pervert. The Emperor reacts sharply, questioning what he means by pervert. He remarks that the investigation sounded strange from the start and asks what Maurice actually did instead of finding the culprit. Maurice explains that he was searching the drawers for the tea box and accidentally pulled out her pajamas, causing a misunderstanding. He loudly declares his own identity as the Imperial Chief Mage and loyal servant of His Majesty. The emperor tells him to shut up and asks if he understands how startled Amelia must have been. Maurice admits that he does, recalling how shocked she looked, saying her eyes nearly popped out. He mentions that she immediately asked whether His Majesty was safe. Hearing that, the emperor smiles faintly. He feels pleased that Amelia worried about him. Maurice watches him and thinks there is something seriously wrong with him. The emperor then thinks to himself that Amelia did not hate him because of what happened yesterday. He asks Maurice whether he found the culprit. Maurice answers that the culprit revealed herself. He explains that the target of the poisoning was not His Majesty, but Miss Amelia. He names Lucia Loragard, the niece of Count Loragard, stating that she held a grudge after losing her position as office maid and targeted Amelia. The emperor repeats Count Loragard's name slowly. Maurice explains that until the moment Lucia poisoned the tea, she probably never imagined Amelia would serve it to His Majesty. If Amelia had been hurt, Lucia likely planned to reclaim the office maid position. The emperor suddenly erupts in anger, shouting that of course his maid is clever and demanding how anyone dared to touch his maid. Maurice calmly points out that Lucia is also His Majesty's maid. The emperor asks whether he can prove Lucia's guilt in front of everyone. Maurice replies that he has prepared magic that can restore Lucia's traces left on the tea box at any time. The emperor praises him. Maurice then adds that he secretly cast a spell on Lucia forbidding her from speaking about the incident and asks what His Majesty plans to do. The emperor glances at the sword neatly tucked away in his drawer and remarks that he should use it before it rusts. Maurice complains that he barely slept and had to deal with all this as well. He adds that he told Miss Amelia His Majesty would be busy, so she should not come out today. The emperor reacts sharply, repeating the words barely slept. He curses under his breath and realizes that Amelia stayed up all night worrying about him. He slams his hand onto the desk and asks what if her health suffered because of it. Maurice says that they do not know for sure whether she stayed up because she was worried about him. The emperor snaps at him to be quiet and asks what he would know. Maurice backs off and changes the topic. He then asks His Majesty whether helping Miss Amelia this time is also one of those swords tucked away in the drawer.